We are Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg here in South Africa. Once again, my name, of course, Evan Janssen. The show is very much live and broadcast from our studios right here in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Don't forget, weekdays between 9 and 12, we also stream live on YouTube. You can also watch us back on that same facility throughout the rest of the day on demand. Now, today we ask you a question. Yesterday here in South Africa, the domestic ban on trade in rhino horn was lifted. Caused quite an uproar. What are your views on this? What will the impact be of this latest development? That's what we would like you to tell us today. We'll look back at it throughout the entire show today. But first, let's go for a news update with Elvis President.
Thank you, Evan. And let's take it right from the top. Let's take a look at your top stories this hour. Pope Francis will arrive in Uganda today on the second leg of his visit to East Africa. President Jacob Zuma has called for more cooperation among African countries in supporting anti-terrorism initiatives. And France is set to hold a national memorial service today for the 130 people who died in the Paris attacks 2 weeks ago. These and more stories coming up, but first, before we go there, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what is happening on the sports front. A very good morning to you, Kendall.
Good morning, Elvis, and thank you very much, and a hearty good morning to you at home as well. This is what we've got for you in the sports today. Orlando Pirates to play for glory in Tunisia amid security concerns after the latest terror attack in Tunis.
This resistance is very, very admirable.
The Proteas show a bit of steel on day 2 of their third test in Nagpur, defending well and batting through the overs.
First ball with a big ball.
The historic first day-night test is underway at the Adelaide Oval between Australia and New Zealand. And that's what we've got for you in the sports. Make sure you stick around for that. 10:20 or so. Back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. And as the Afrikaners would say, it is Nag in Nagpur for the Proteas. But we'll get back to that story a little bit later, and Kendall will keep you updated as we continue. Top story this hour. Pope Francis will arrive in Uganda today on the second leg of his visit to East Africa. The Pope has spent 3 days in Kenya, where he encouraged reconciliation between the Christians and the Muslims. Ugandans are looking forward to welcoming the Catholic pontiff.
The Pearl of Africa, Uganda's tagline for investors and tourists. And like pearls, the country's 14 million Catholics, about 42% of the population, believe they are precious and desirable to the biggest Christian church in the world. Further proof of that, Uganda is home to 24 Catholic martyrs that the church recognizes as people who died for their faith, and in whose name this shrine was built, and from where Pope Francis will celebrate Mass at the weekend.
The Pope has come to celebrate faith of our ancestors, and he has also come to renew his faith. So he comes with us so that he invites Ugandans to constantly renew their faith in God and in the church.
The pontiff arrives in the middle of an election campaign. Ugandans want him to also pray for those that want to run this country for at least another 5 years. Yoweri Museveni, who has been ruling this country for almost 30 years now, looks set for yet another landslide.
If the Pope can pray to us, and we have leaders who can at least help us, and if we have some good limits, term limits, see, African leaders, they always want to lead and lead with no stopping.
Uganda have been facing a lot of corruption. Those people who are in the government are corrupt. I beg the Pope to pray for the people, to pray for those guys who are corrupt so that they stop corruption.
While Ugandans were busy putting finishing touches to their preparatory work, getting ready to take over from where Kenya would have left on Friday, elsewhere in the world, doubting Thomases were still skeptical of the pontiff's decision to visit, quote, war-torn Africa.
Africa is very secure. Africa is stable. Africa is making tremendous progress. There are a few isolated areas where there may be some problems, tell me which continent does not have problems. Is it Europe? No.
Pope Francis arrives in Uganda on Friday evening. Vuyomvoko, SABC News, Kampala, Uganda.
Now, to get a sense of the preparations and what will be happening in Uganda on the papal visit, we are joined by our SABC correspondent, Julius Mugambwa, in Kampala, Uganda. A very good morning to you, Julius, and welcome. And can you tell us, ahead of the Pope's arrival in Uganda, what is the build-up like and what are the preparations been so far? Well, it seems like Julius can't hear us right now. Julius, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Julius, can you hear us now?
Okay, sorry, I can't hear you, but to give you a brief of what's happening in Uganda, it's a very joyous mood here in Kampala. Right behind me is where the Pope is expected to meet the youth. Now, you might understand that Uganda has one of the world's biggest population of the youth. More than 50% of the country's population are youth. And now, if the Pope is here to meet the youth, he's here to strengthen the faith among these people now who build the base of the church. There's a strong following of the Catholic Church in Uganda. You understand more than 40% of the people here are Catholics. And that brings us to 14 million people who are following the Catholic faith. And the Pope coming here, and we know he's been preaching peace. He's been preaching reconciliation in the country. Sorry, in Africa, in Kenya, where he's urging people to tolerate each other, people to learn to believe in each other, people to extend friendship to each other, especially the needy. Everyone knows Pope Francis as one who has been close to the poor people. When he became Pope, he announced it very clear that this is a charge for the poor. And we believe when he comes to Uganda, he's going to send out that very message to the many Ugandans who are waiting for him. To know that, okay, the country is going into elections, the region is challenged with terrorism and all those ideological differences, the interreligious wars in Central African Republic. And we imagine if the Pope gets up to speak, he will send out that message.
Julius, I'm not too sure if you can still hear me, but there were some concerns about the state of readiness of Uganda before the Pope's arrival. Right now, as we speak, is everything in order? Well, it seems like there is still a problem there with the sound quality, and he can't really hear us on the other side. That was our SABC Julius Mugambwa in Kampala in Uganda on the Papal's visit to Uganda, and we'll see if we can update you on that story as we continue here on Newsroom today. So don't go away. Do not touch that remote. Now, back home, President Jacob Zuma has welcomed the ambassadors and high commissioners from Europe, South America, Africa, and the Middle East. They presented their credentials to the president last night.
15 countries, including the European Union, strengthening economic and political relations with South Africa. The new ambassadors and high commissioners arriving at a time when acts of terrorism are on the rise. The first to present his credentials, the Zambian High Commissioner, a country with historic relations to South Africa dating back to the liberation struggle against apartheid.
Our unwavering support and active participation in the liberation struggle was driven by the principle that if any part of Africa was not free, we as Zambians and the frontline states were not free.
In receiving them, the president assured them about the importance of their states to South Africa. President Zuma says he's encouraged by the G20 countries' commitment in finding a lasting solution to the refugee crisis.
We acknowledge that management of refugees is an immediate challenge. However, we all have a responsibility to address the root causes of this crisis.
President Zuma reminded them about the need for partnerships in addressing the challenges of climate change, political instability, and the economy.
French mourners mark 1 week since the Paris attacks at the Bataclan concert hall that killed 129 people across the French capital. Rain could not even deter the crowd from gathering to remember and honor their loved ones. A sea of flowers, candles, photos and drawings flow into the sidewalk in front of the Bataclan Concert Hall, where 3 gunmen strapped with explosives stormed the venue of a rock concert, took hostages and killed scores of people in the biggest loss of life during Friday's violence last Friday. People continued to visit the makeshift shrine despite the heavy rain that fell through the afternoon. The French president's office announced on Friday that the nation would pay homage to the victims of the Paris attacks, and that would take place on November the 27th. The victims of the attacks, the deadliest in France since World War II, came from 17 different countries. Many of them young people out on a Friday night at bars, in restaurants, a concert hall and a football stadium. Islamic State says it carried out the attacks in retaliation for French air raids on its position. Well, that's all the news we have for you for now. Eben Janssen is standing by with more news, interviews and reviews. Over to you, Eben.
Thank you very much, Elvis, and a very good morning to all of you at home or wherever you're watching this telecast now. This morning we look at dog fighting, and it's a gruesome blood sport in which perpetrators encourage 2 dogs to attack each other, fight each other, often to the death. The dogs are habitually kept in horrendous conditions, hidden away from the public as the activity is illegal, with serious implications for anyone caught or any involvement really in dog fighting. Please be aware that the following insert has some graphic images and is definitely not for sensitive viewers. This report was filed by Nina Oosthuizen.
The crime of dog fighting is a thriving underground activity in both urban and rural areas across the country, where dog fighters are often, if not always, linked to other illegal activities which often cripples the community. Wendy Wilson, a senior inspector from the National Council of SPCA's Special Investigations Unit, explains that South Africa's Animal Protection Act is a very strong piece of legislation in addressing animal fights. Whether a person owns dogs for fighting purposes or are using them to export by breeding them, anyone who has knowledge on dog fights or when they might take place will feel the full force of the law.
It's all the people involved. It's the spectators, it's the organisers, it's the property owners, whether they live on the property or not. If their property is found to be used in the illegal activity of dog fighting, they are also liable to prosecution.
On Wednesday, the accused in the Attridgeville bait dog case did not show up for sentencing, and a warrant of arrest has been issued. Here, the NSPCA received footage of a young female dog that was dragged around on a chain with its mouth bound with duct tape for another pit bull to attack in a training exercise. Children were among the crowd of people who were spectators watching this abuse. After an ensuing investigation, the NSPCA were able to catch the dog fighters and the spectators and were able to rescue 8 dogs. The case has been postponed to the 9th of December. It has been shown that people involved in the merciless slaughter of animals for entertainment have very low levels of empathy and high level of interest in violence, as Wilson elaborates.
Right around the world, it's well known that people that have low levels of empathy, high levels of interest in violence, can be linked to other control crimes, whether that's arson or rape. It's always crimes that are taking advantage of another vulnerable person. And once someone is engaged in a criminal activity, the temptation to be engaged in other criminal activities is very, very high. So definitely within each community, it's in their interest to stand up and eradicate these people from their society.
Recently, the community of Tsepitsong in Kagiso on the west rand of Johannesburg decided to stand up against dog fighters and the violence which it incites. People of Tsepitsong have become increasingly concerned about the often atrocious conditions these dogs were being kept in and were growing tired of the constant stream of injured, broken and bleeding dogs. They brought their concerns to community-led Animal Welfare, who operates a community-based initiative assisting all pet owners from impoverished settlements around Soweto in Gauteng. Lumke Golentete, Claw Primary Animal Caretaker, explains that the animal hospital noticed a rise in pit bull ownership in the area. They were also dealing with an influx of injured dogs, with continuous rumours coming in that these dogs were being used for criminal activities.
Okay, this dog fighting thing really gives a really bad impact, especially on kids. Like growing up and seeing the violence that happens, like when they're doing the dog fight, they end up also inheriting that and then it goes on because they see it as the nice thing to do, which like damages them psychologically and shows them like violent is the right way to go, for like not knowing that behind the violence that they're doing on the dog fight, it's like crime. So it's a really bad impact on the kids.
Claw then referred community members to the NSPCA's Special Investigations Unit, where intensive investigation ensued. It's not just the act of fighting that is incredibly barbaric, it's everything around it as well.
Conditions of these dogs, it's what they go through, the abuse, the neglect, never seeing a vet, never having any sort of attention, never being able to express normal dog behaviour. They kept locked up in the tiniest cages, they kept hidden, chained up. One of the dogs that was found in the raid was actually chained up inside a metal enclosure, a completely zinc metal enclosure. And the temperatures that dog must have experienced, especially during the recent heat wave, must have been phenomenal.
In the first part of the action undertook in Tsepitsong, inspectors from the NSPCA and SAPS officers from the West Rand Canine Unit found 7 injured and very grievously ill dogs, which took a huge emotional toll on the raid team.
One of the dogs was in an absolutely shocking condition. The person who owned him actually knew that he had biliary and had decided not to do anything, and he just left him to die.
One of the dogs rescued was a blind pit bull forced to fight and eloquently named Braveheart by the raid team. 5 suspects were arrested in the raid. In South Africa, the breed of preference for low-level dogfights is the American Pit Bull Terrier, but other breeds such as Bull Terriers and the Chinese Shar-Pei are also used. Wilson explains further that when dogs are successfully rescued during these raids, the NSPCA will receive an influx of queries from the public asking whether this stolen dog has been found.
At this lower level of fighting, we do find a lot of stolen dogs, or we hear that a lot of the dogs that have been used have been stolen. Unfortunately, they also target animals that are not microchipped, don't have collars, so that they are more untraceable. They just don't want to spend the time and effort of raising a young dog, raising a puppy, to get that satisfaction and to get that blood sport going. They would rather steal an adult dog or find free to a good home, some sort of source where they've got an adult dog and they can go straight into fighting.
There is also an increase seen in illegal dog fighting and stolen dog cases during the festive season. Recently, the SPCA kennels in Roodepoort-Moreesburg were targeted. The locks to the shelters were cut and 2 pit bull terriers stolen from the premises.
A lot of kids, a lot of young people are out of jobs, on holiday, festive season, bored people, and they do engage far more in this illegal activity. Another horrible fact is that during the festive season, people are giving away dogs because they want a new puppy. People are being given dogs and kittens and everything else for Christmas gifts, and the old dog is given away. And they should ask themselves, where's that dog ending up?
The NSPCA offers a reward of up to 15,000 rand for information leading to the arrest and conviction of dog fighters. For SABC News on the West Rand of Johannesburg, I'm Nina Oosthuizen.
Well, we stay with animals at risk. Some wildlife groups have welcomed a High Court ruling lifting a 6-year ban on rhino horn trade here in South Africa. The application was brought by South Africa's 2 biggest private rhino breeders, John Hume and Johan Kruger. The Department of Environmental Affairs intends to fight this ruling.
Almost 5,000 rhino have been killed in the country since 2008. Before February 2009, when the ban on rhino trade was invoked, fewer than 100 rhino were poached annually. Rhino breeders Hume and Kruger argue that the moratorium on horn trade caused the current poaching crisis. Many wildlife groups echoed this sentiment.
We have always argued that the moratorium started the whole process of poaching to a very large extent. As soon as the moratorium was implemented in 2009, a month afterwards, we started having the increase in poaching, and it continued month after month.
6 years later, a ruling declaring the ban invalid. The matter was heard by a full bench of the High Court. The 3 judges stated that there would be no negative implications on lifting the moratorium.
Why would a poacher then go for the high-risk mechanism to get their hands on the product, rather if they can buy it at a reasonable rate or a reasonable price?
But the legal battle is not over yet. The Department of Environmental Affairs says it will appeal the High Court ruling. This comes as no surprise. Initially, it had opposed the application to lift the ban, arguing the spike in rhino poaching is caused by an increase in crime syndicates and not the trade ban. The ban remains lifted until the department files its application for leave to appeal. Sipho Sturman, SABC News, Pretoria.
Yeah, that was the High Court, and of course the court in the capital has set aside government's 2009 ban on domestic trade on rhino horn in South Africa. The court ruling comes after a series of cases, the escalation in rhino poaching here in South Africa. Lots of varying views after this development. Let's go to your tweets to see what you are thinking about the latest development. Sure Kamhunga says, South African Environment Minister plans to appeal against the High Court ruling setting aside the moratorium on domestic trade in rhino horn. Yes, that's as we reported just now. Now Tim Brown talks about rhino horn trade in South Africa legal today. Did I hear right? Wow. Yes, very interesting one that is. Africa Green Media talks about as the South African High Court judge sacrificed rhinos to more danger after a ruling that lifts a ban on domestic trade of rhino horn. Maleficent talks about rhino horn only legal to trade domestically. I'm not the only one worried that it's going to increase poaching. Conservationists as well. That one from Crazy Doctor Lady. Of course, we're asking you a question today. It's a serious question. It's with regards to the lifting of the ban. The domestic ban on trade in rhino horn has been lifted. What impact will this have? That's what we would like you to tell us today. What are your views with regards to this? Now, I can tell you last week we spoke to 50/50 presenter and filmmaker Bonnet de Bod about her recent trip to Asia as part of the filming of her rhino movie. It's called Strip, which means poach in English. But back home, she's been visiting a number of reserves, and we first ask her about the effects of the drought on rhino in South Africa's parks.
Of rain yesterday, and I know it looks set to rain today, which is fantastic news. But the drought has not only been affecting our poor farmers, it's also had a massive impact on our rhinos. Several rhinos have been getting stuck in the Shushlui River in KZN. Now, we all know Shushlui Mfolozi Game Reserve as the home of the white rhino, and that is where rhino icon Dr. Ian Player initiated Operation Rhino, and which went on to save the species and gave us a healthy number of around 20,000 white rhinos a few years ago. So the Esenvelo Game Capture Unit is actually famous for their knowledge and their ability to save rhinos. So they were out in full force last week, saving quite a few rhinos over a few days. And I have a couple of pictures here from the team to show you just how dire it really was.
You can see the rhino there just coming out. And there's one being fed, obviously. Yes.
That is the very famous legend, really, Dr. Ian Player. And there you can see, stuck in the mud, rhinos love to wallow. And not just to get rid of parasites, but to cool down. So with temperatures of around 40 degrees Celsius, the team set out about freeing these animals. And normally the locations are quite remote, and a team of up to 20 men have to pull the rhino out. But in this case, they were very lucky because they were able to get a tractor pretty close to the various rhinos. tranquilize them, blindfold them, put a rope around their heads and pull them out that way. And what I didn't know is the trick to getting a rhino out is to put them on their sides and pull them out that way. So I thought they did a fantastic job, and with the poaching being out of control, we need to save every rhino we can.
Fascinating stuff. Now, you just arrived from Asia. Why did you go there, by the way?
Well, as you know, filming on my documentary, Stroop, I have to cover all aspects around the rhino poaching crisis. And although I've spent a lot of time here in South Africa looking at this, the source site, I felt it was very important for me to visit the demand site and see for myself what the fuss is about when it comes to rhino horn. And it's actually quite confusing what rhino horn is used for. I mean, for the longest time, I thought they use it as an aphrodisiac.
Yes.
Then I heard, no, they use it to cure cancer. And then also they use it as dagger handles in Yemen. So I can tell you this from my time in Asia. Rhino horn is used in two different ways in Asia. Firstly, as a medicine, as a tonic, and secondly, as luxury goods, like jewelry for women and drinking cups for men. And I also spent some time with a rhino horn user in Vietnam. Very difficult, of course, to set up that interview, but there I saw exactly how they use rhino horn. So they take a little piece and then they grind it into a grinding bowl. And I've got an example here for you.
Yes.
This is a typical grinding bowl. And you'll see there's a picture of a rhino on the side.
Yes.
And the bottom is quite rough.
It's a rough feel.
Feel.
Why is that?
So this rhino horn user actually showed me how she would grind a piece in the bottom of this bowl with a little bit of water. And then after about 45 minutes, it's ground down enough for her to drink. And this cancer patient told me that it tastes quite bitter and actually made her feel nauseous. So a lot of Vietnamese people believe in the power of rhino horn as a detoxifier, as a cleaning agent, cleaning the body of toxins. So I also met with the demand reduction campaign groups to see what they are doing and how they are tackling this problem. And what they were saying is a lot of Vietnamese businessmen actually gift rhino horn to procure government tenders. So it's a general feeling among businessmen that, look, rhino horn is illegal and it's the most expensive substance on earth. So if you can secure a piece of rhino horn, well, then you're the guy to do business with. Because you can pretty much put your hand and get your hand on anything and everything.
I see. You only visit Vietnam, or was there other Asian countries that you also visited?
I can't reveal locations just yet, as I was also filming an ongoing investigation into wildlife trafficking, but the major demand countries, China, Laos and Vietnam.
Also, kudos to you, just briefly. I believe that you've got the Kudu Award recently. It's one of the best journalists. And the other one was for your Rhino series on 50/50.
That's right. No, thank you very much. Winning Best Journalist for 2015 and also Best Program is an incredible achievement, and I'm very honoured. But, I think the most important thing is it puts the focus back on the rhinos. Last year I was told that there's something called rhino fatigue. And yes, it's very important to find new and interesting ways to present the crisis to the public. But at the end of the day, if the public are given the hard truth, the reality on the ground, that's what they want to see, that's what they want to hear.
Yes. Bonnie de Bot, thank you so much and congratulations once again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, that interview was done a little bit earlier this week. It was recorded. Bonnie, of course, is a weekly contributor on the show. Next week we'll look at some of the other elements that is a fascinating story that is, kind of playing right in front of our eyes here on the African continent. Now, let's take a look at our picture of the day. It comes from our very own Janine Lee. And it says, a reinforced hill near Utenay has collapsed. There are unconfirmed reports of fatalities. Now, that's a developing story. Also, we'll let you know what are the outcomes from this picture from Janine Ali that's just coming. Let's now take a look at what's happening elsewhere. Front pages from around the globe. We start in Europe, where the Times reports that Jeremy Corbyn was plunged into the deepest crisis of his Labour leadership last night as shadow cabinet divisions over Syrian airstrikes were exposed. Then, across the pond, as they call it in the UK, the International New York Times says Pope Francis also said the need for dialogue between religions is essential during a mass on his first official trip to Africa. Then we go to the Far East, where the South China Morning Post talks about Chinese-Canadian beauty queen and actress Anastasia Lin was blocked from entering mainland China yesterday to compete in the Miss World pageant after she criticized the country's sense of security. Very interesting story, that one is. Well, time now for us to take a break, but when we come back, Elvis will be talking around housing, issues with housing after the latest South African Human Rights Commission report. Don't miss that.
This is the first time we've ever been on holiday. I wanted it to be special. This holiday has brought a lot of things to us. It's made us closer and love each other more.
It's Moneypenny. I've got your phone. Will you do me a favour next time? Go and pick it up yourself.
Welcome back. A 1994 housing white paper described providing housing to South African citizens as one of the greatest challenges facing government. Now, it estimated then that the urban housing backlog stood at about 1.5 million houses, and that backlog was growing at a rate of 178,000 units a year. By 2011, the census showed that the number of shacks and informal dwellings had increased to about 1.9 million. Last week, the South African Human Rights Commission launched a national report focusing on a wave of service delivery protests predominantly occurring in South Africa's urban townships and informal settlement areas. That report revealed that top grievances raised during protests have been about the provision of service delivery, which has been very violent in many areas. South African Human Rights Commissioner Advocate Mohammed Amir Mia now joins us in studio to talk to us about that. A very good morning to you, sir, and welcome.
Good morning to you and to your listeners. Thank you for inviting me and having me here.
Advocate, first and foremost, take us through the report. What was it all about?
Yeah. The report was basically around the access to housing, local governance and service delivery. Mm-hmm. And it was underpinned by a 2012 water and sanitation report that was produced by the Human Rights Commission, which had starking findings around the non-delivery of basic services like water and sanitation. Mm-hmm. We used that report and we called in a group of experts, and we then called government, and we wanted to know about what is happening in the housing arena, because it's a constitutional right and a guarantee that everybody should be having houses, the poorest of the poor in this case, in line with Section 26 of the Constitution. We found that there were 10 respondents. It was the National Government of Human Settlements, it was the National Government of COCTA, Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, covering all 278 municipalities, And then we called the 3 provincial governments, that is Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal, as well as the Western Cape. And then we called the 3 metros, that is the city of Cape Town, city of Johannesburg, and eThekwini municipality, that is the city of Durban. And we then asked them, why is it that things are not working? And we want to get to the bottom of it all.
Yes.
Now, they came with different responses, and those responses basically, gave us a lot of flesh, in the sense that we want to know there is a brilliant constitution, there is money allocated for these kind of projects and programs. We have a pro constitution. We have the Bill of Rights that talks about the rights of the poor people to get those basic services.
Yes.
But things are not working. Why? What we then found was very startling, because we found that there's excellent pieces of legislation in place, but unfortunately the 3 layers of government, or the 3 spheres of government, are not talking to each other. Now, if local government is at the coalface of service delivery, then the question is, what is their capacity as well? We found something very striking, in the sense that there are 278 municipalities. In 15 years after Chapter 7 of the Constitution kicked in to create the local government, not one municipality in this country is accredited for the delivery of services. So they have to rely on like Big Brother, like the provincial government or the national government. And then there's a plethora of legislation that's there. And then those legislation don't speak to each other, and so it creates confusion in the communities as well, because they don't know what to expect.
Yes. Now, your report also looked at access to local government and access to citizens. Is that part and parcel of the delivery?
No, absolutely. We think the citizens are central to the whole issue of service delivery, and they should be invited to the discussion for their own development. You shouldn't have a top-down approach, but you should have an approach from the bottom, asking communities on the ground what are their needs, and then prioritize your budget in terms of what their needs are. Now, unfortunately, that's not happening. Now, this is the cause of the service delivery protest that we're talking about. Now, what happens is, in as much as the Constitution guarantees in Section 17 the right to protest, we also appeal to people who are protesting, that there's an obligation on them to protect the infrastructure that's there, not burn it. Because you burn a clinic today, you're going to need it tomorrow. You burn a school today, you're going to need it tomorrow. So that's what we're saying is, do it in a constructive way and do it in a meaningful way and engage the process.
We need a much longer time to discuss this, Advocate, but just finally, was there any recommendations that came out of the report?
The recommendations we're saying to the national government of housing is that you've put a budget together. We want to know that since 1994 you put 2.8 million houses housing 12.5 million people. Why isn't there more done? What happened to the money that was budgeted for this? Because 1% of the GDP goes towards housing service delivery, and we wanted to know why the backlogs. For provincial government, we want to know why are they not supporting the local municipalities. Local municipalities, why are you not talking to the people on the ground as well? So it's a knock-on effect kind of thing. So that's where we are at the moment. But it's a 100-page report. The report is on our website.
Yes.
www.southafricanhumanrightscommission.org.za.
Commissioner, thank you so much for your time.
You're most welcome.
Joining us here. That was Commissioner Mohammed Amarmia from the South African Human Rights Commission chatting to us about housing. But now, time for more interviews and analysis with Evan Janssen.
Yeah, thank you, Elvis. Of course, it's a big day today for Uganda. Pope Francis will arrive there shortly, the second leg of his visit to the African continent. The Pope spent the last couple of days in Kenya, where his message was that of reconciliation between Christians and Muslims. Now, our contributing editor, Vuyo Mvoko, is in Uganda. He'll be filing reports throughout the day. We'll also be crossing live there to keep you in the loop with His Holiness's visit to Uganda. Let's have a look at what you are talking about now. Sarah Kamani, that's our very own East African correspondent, talks about after the Pope left, Pope Francis delivers a hard-hitting message in Kangemi, condemning land grabbing and leaders who cling to power and oppress the poor. Yes, pulling no punches as he wrapped up his visit to Kenya. Thaddeus talks about it. As Pope visits Kangemi, this symbolizes that all of us are children of the Almighty God, irrespective of social sphere, tribe, and religion. Another one from Sarah. Pope to the people in Kangemi. I'm here to encourage you and to tell you I know your troubles. That's part of the message. Then Masaruka Jackson talks about Pope's visit to Uganda. Doesn't help anybody, but it just puts us in poverty way. Yes. King Sal talks about, so now that the Pope is in Uganda, what should I ask him? Well, many people are asking for a special prayer for the Pope to pray for Uganda. Now, for the entire African continent, really. As we shift our focus now back here to South Africa, thousands of people are expected to flock to different local shores as the festive season approaches. There's also a distasteful growing trend, an increase in the number of children getting lost, putting them at risk and vulnerable to perpetrators of crime. Ensuring safety and security during this time is a headache and a huge burden for safety authorities. Now, joining us in our Cape Town studios is Craig Lamberton from the National Sea Rescue Institute. Well, he's here to tell us about the dangers. Good morning to you, Craig. Thanks for joining us.
Morning. Thank you for having us.
What are the beach dangers to look out for at this time of year? What do you think are the things that the public are not aware of?
Even the greatest danger at the beaches, obviously, are the rip currents. Also, twice a month, you get a spring tide, which means a higher than normal high tide, a lower than normal low tide, and much stronger than normal rip currents. So really, if you are going to go to the beach with your family this holiday, prepare before you go, learn as much as you can about these rip currents, the spring tides, but also go to beaches where and when the lifeguards are on duty, obey their instructions, swim within the safety marcated swimming zones that they use, the red and yellow flags. They will move those regularly throughout the day when they detect where the rip currents are forming at the beach, and they'll ask the public to move, the bathers to move to the safe area. But also when you get to the beach with your family, make sure you identify where the law enforcement officers are, where the lifeguards are. If you need any assistance, approach them. They're there to help you. And especially if your children get separated from you, the children must know where to go to get help, and so it's important that you do identify where they are on the beach, but also make sure if you are anywhere around water with your children, that your children have responsible adult supervision if they're playing in the water or swimming.
Now, Craig, the numbers that I see say that the incidence of drownings have come down. How are you reading that?
Obviously, we've embarked on a massive campaign called Waterwise to train what would still be named today as previously disadvantaged people who didn't have access to swimming lessons and safety measures around water. And it doesn't only teach safety around like rip currents or water. It also teaches CPR. It teaches how do you activate an emergency response if you come across somebody who's got into difficulty. And obviously the emphasis around water. We're hoping that this has made an impact, but it's certainly also the massive media coverage that we enjoy from the likes of yourselves, teaching people about safety around water.
What about safety outside of the water? What about the high levels of crime we're seeing this time of the year? What about pickpocketing and that sort of thing? What should people be aware of with regards to that?
Look, obviously, it is there. So the law enforcement officers, the police, they do have a campaign to try to combat that. If you see anything suspicious, you should approach them, but also make sure that you've got all of your possessions safe on the beach. If you do go into the water, make sure that you've left someone behind to look after your possessions, that you don't all go into the water yourselves and get back and find that all of your possessions have been taken. It is obviously a very sad occurrence. Everybody goes to the beach to enjoy themselves, but from our perspective, our primary message is just have a safety-conscious mindset around water, especially down at the beach.
What about alcohol? It continues to be a problem, Craig. It's not allowed on our beaches, but it continues to be a problem, isn't it?
Obviously, if you're going to go swimming or boating and you've been drinking alcohol, it does impair your senses. It's more possible that you're going to get into difficulty. Certainly also things like hypothermia are heightened if you've been drinking alcohol. But if you get caught in a rip current and you've been drinking alcohol, you really don't have much chance of survival. So it is something that we obviously urge people, don't drink alcohol, but even at your swimming pool at home, don't drink alcohol around your swimming pool at home, because a lot of accidents occur there as well, at your home swimming pool, with people falling, bumping their heads if they've been drinking around the pool.
I don't think there's much of a chance of us getting that message across, Craig. Thank you very much for joining us today. That is the spokesperson of the National Sea Rescue Institute. He says, don't drink around your pool this summer. I don't think South Africans, especially the ones living in the heat waves here in the northern parts of the country, it's kind of become culture to sit next to the pool with a cold one. But anyhow, let's take a look at what's happening around the country today. Of course, we'll start in Cape Town, and we stay with a drink. The drunk driving trial of ANC NEC member Tony Ngeni, well, it's expected to begin in the Magistrates Court there today. Also in Cape Town, a pre-trial conference is expected to be held in the High Court about the woman who allegedly stole Zephany Nurse from Groote Schuur Hospital about 18 years ago. There's a wonderful book that's written by a former colleague of mine, Hanut Beinkart, that deals with that story. Moving on, let's take a look at what's happening on our Newsroom Facebook page today. France and Russia will exchange intelligence on the Islamic State and other rebel groups to improve the effectiveness of their aerial bombing campaigns in Syria. French President François Hollande said on Thursday, this after talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Then Zimbabwe will soon gazette a new framework for its indigenization laws. Authorities say the move will attract investors and eliminate discretionary application. The country's finance minister, Patrick Chinamasa, revealed this when he presented the 2016 budget. Finally, National Education, Health and Allied Workers Union, Nahawu chairperson in Parliament, Stembiso Tembe, says he's confident that a deal will soon be reached between Parliament and the union to end an ongoing strike by parliamentary staff there. That's what you can find on our Facebook page. Of course, I can give you a quick update on the cricket. South Africa, well, we're known to have a fighting spirit, don't we? They are 127 for 4, a partnership of nearly 100 now between Faf du Plessis and Captain Hashim Amla, fighting all the way. It's tough going in Nagpur. Alva said it's Nag in Nagpur, not quite yet. We fight on in South Africa after a short break.
The road to greatness is not an easy one. It's rough, tough, and full of barriers. And there's only one way to master it. Never, ever stop. Dauntless. The all-new Audi Q7.
Hi, just brushing up on my party. We are going to make it number 12, official. Let me teach you a quick word.
Yeah.
Quite a star. A woman who has mastered the art of dancing in high heels. It's up and flick.
Get a bottle of Glenfiddich 12-year-old with 2 glasses for only $3.99.99 and help make party South Africa's 12th official language. Tops at Spar. Shake things up.
Philips. We wake up every morning and ask, how can innovation make a difference to you? How can thousands of LEDs bring the pyramids to life and light up hearts? How can an air fryer make delicious traditional meals with up to 80% less fat? How can portable ultrasound be part of a program to help lower infant mortality in Uganda? Because the only innovation that really matters is innovation that matters to you. Innovation and you. Philips.
Welcome back. Now, in 1933, Mr. Robert L. Ripley undertook one of his longest trips from Cairo down to South Africa. It was a 2-month trip, highly publicized, and hundreds of people flocked to see him with their odd collectibles. Now, this December, Ripley's Believe It or Not will be bringing more than 100 oddities back to South Africa, showcasing the weirdest, craziest, and most fascinating artifacts in various malls around the country. This to celebrate 95 years of the world-famous collection. Now, I'm joined in studio today by a couple of members of the Ripley's Believe It or Not South African tour, Pierre Botha and Jacob Lodewijk Gurley. Is that correct?
Gurley.
Gurley. Tell me a little bit about yourself then, Jacob.
My name is Jacob. I'm 1.22 meters tall. I'm one of the short people in South Africa.
Is it? Where did you grow up?
I grew up here in Pretoria.
In Pretoria?
In Pretoria.
Oh, that's fantastic. 1.22, one of the shortest people in the country.
Yes.
And how old are you?
I'm 37.
37. Jeez, you are in my kind of age group, man. Wonderful to have you with us. Of course, I got Pierre Botha also here with us. Pierre, tell us about Ripley's Believe It or Not, the tour that you guys are undertaking here in South Africa.
Well, I think with Ripley's being so popular in the world and the show that aired on TV in the past, we went back to Ripley's Entertainment in the USA and asked them to bring the artifacts back to South Africa. So they agreed to do it in a format of a tour that's displayed in shopping centres. And that's basically how it starts. And we went over, got the artifacts, and yes, they are here in the country.
Tell me about the collection, the artifact collection. What's in this collection? It must be quite an immense collection.
We've got quite a few. We've got 140 artifacts. They are broken up into themed areas. So we've got the space category, for example. That one is quite nice with regards to in the eye of a needle, there is a moon landing that was done by Robert Widget, and that's quite popular, as well as a wax statue of Neil Armstrong. Then we've got human oddities, as can be seen on the screen at the moment. That's the lizard man. He's tattooed from head to toes on his body, and on that display you'll also see the vampire lady, Maria Jose. She's actually an advocate, but went through severe child abuse and decided to become a tattoo artist and display her body as a piece of art to show how she overcame the adversities.
Wow, that's incredible. And the tour is going to go around all the big cities in South Africa?
Yes, it's currently in Nelspruit at the Langa Mall. Coming back next month, going to go to Mall of the North in Polokwane. Then coming back to Pretoria side in January, February, when it's going to go to Jubilee Mall, Brits Mall, and then down to Weskus Mall in the Western Cape.
That's fantastic. And Jacob, what are you going to be touring all around the country as well, or you're just here in Gauteng?
No, I was there in Pretoria when they started the tour with the first exhibition. I was involved there. I was helping with next to the tallest man in the world.
Just, that must be quite a sight, putting you next to the tallest man in the world, eh?
It was.
That was actually Robert Watlow.
Yeah?
He was obviously very tall. We've got his clothes and the chair he sat in on display, and he sat on that chair, and it was quite...
Just, can I ask you just to stand next to me so that I can also feel big? Hey, look at this, one of the shortest guys in South Africa. He's with the Ripley's Believe It or Not, Jacob Lodewijk Gurley. Now, Pierre, what about artifacts? We know this collection is a global collection, but what about African artifacts? What are some of the things that are peculiar that we're going to see?
There's mummies on display. The Savian Indians from the equator actually collected mummy heads for as war trophies. So we've got that on display. We've got normal mummies. And then obviously in 1933, when Robert Ripley were in South Africa, we've got a stand specifically dedicated to him to show what artifacts from Africa he collected.
Well, that's amazing. But now we live in the 2013s, 2015s actually. The internet has changed the game. How has it changed the way that you guys do business, really?
Well, for Ripley's?
Yes.
Well, I think it makes it easier for people to get in contact with Ripley's and to share their stories and their oddities. Robert Ripley was the modern Marco Polo, and I think technology just helped it to even modernize it further.
Well, guys, fantastic. I wish you all the best with what is a fantastic initiative. The Ripley's Believe It or Not tour is around the country. Pierre Botha is doing the tour, and Jacob Lodewijk Gurley is one of the shortest people here in South Africa. He's also on the road with the tour. It'll be a fantastic view. Just have a look. Go online and see where the tour will be next. You'll be able to see some of the amazing things that you'd never ever thought would be possible in your life on the Ripley's Believe It or Not tour here in South Africa. Guys, thank you very much for coming in this morning. Now, before we wrap, struggle icon and stalwart Ahmed Kathrada has been awarded with the Freedom of the City of Cape Town award. That's at the City Hall, and it happened last night, of course, there. As you can see, Auntie Pat there for the photo opportunity. An official occasion it was. A man that spent many years on the other side of Cape Town when he didn't have the freedom of Cape Town. He was incarcerated there. Very, very one of the stalwarts of South Africa's struggle for freedom, Ahmed Kathrada. There are some of your views. Congratulations, says Sadna Ahmed Kathrada, on receiving the freedom of the City of Cape Town. People like Mandela, Sobukwe, Kathrada will always have a place of honor in our minds as the true leaders of the people, says Mfundo. Sadna again, congratulations on receiving the freedom of the city. Then Tumelo talks about a lot of young people don't even know who Ahmed Kathrada is and just how deep his contribution to the struggle, in the struggle, I would think, in the struggle meant. The freedom of the city that was awarded to Ahmed Kathrada yesterday, and, well, none more deserving in our country. I can tell you quickly before we go away, our question of the day: domestic ban on trade and rhino horns been lifted. What impact will this have? Well, there's been varied response. We'll tell you a little bit later what people are saying. Of course, as far as the cricket is concerned, the going is slow and tough, but South Africa is fighting all the way. Faf du Plessis and Hashim Amla, they're still at the crease, 128 for 4 the score. When we come back, top of the hour, we'll give you a complete news update. Don't go away.
SABC News. We report, contextualize and present news and current affairs honestly, fairly and fully. We consider it a duty to provide consistent, relevant, useful and top-quality information and analysis. Our mission is to provide credible, accurate and interesting news programming, bringing news into everyone's homes in everyone's languages. Thank you, South Africa, for relying on SABC News for quality news output and for making us your #1 source of information. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
Are you saying the king must go to jail? You are not royal blood, therefore you are going to serve time on behalf of the king. Where does the public protector stand on this matter? Are you with the marches, for the marches, against the march? If this is your ancestor, it is very much his ancestor as well, because this is the cradle of humankind. Is there God somewhere in your science? Drinking the blood of a person with albinism gives extra magical powers. A man of the cloth is involved here because it would mean that somehow religion is being brought into this part of the myth. What do you say to that?
Watch Question Time with me, Mpho Tsedu, Monday to Thursday at 5:30 p.m. on the SABC News Channel.
It's 10:00 hours Central African time on this Friday, the 27th of November 2015. This is Newsroom. Jumbo Africa, and a very warm welcome to the second hour. I'm Elvis Preston. I'll be with you until 12 o'clock. You have to stay with us as we broadcast live from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. But first, let's take a look at your news headlines. Pope Francis will arrive in Uganda today on the second leg of his visit to East Africa. President Jacob Zuma has called for more cooperation among African countries in supporting anti-terrorism initiatives. And France is set to hold a national memorial service today for the 130 people who died in the Paris attacks 2 weeks ago. Those are all your headlines, but first, before we get to your news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports field. A very good morning to you again.
Good morning, Elvis, and a hearty good morning to all of our viewers back home as well. This is what we've got for you in the sports today. Orlando Pirates to play for glory in Tunisia amid security concerns after the latest terror attack in Tunis.
This resistance is very, very admirable. But we won the partnership.
The Proteas show a bit of steel on day 2 of their third test in Nagpur, defending well and batting through the overs.
First ball with a pink ball.
The historic first day-night test is underway at the Adelaide Oval between Australia and New Zealand. And that in a nutshell is what we've got for you in the sports. Make sure you stick around for that around about 20:20. We'll also be chatting to the Tunisian ambassador to South Africa to find out about the conditions on the ground out in Tunisia. Back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. That's all coming up a little bit later, but right now, your top story this hour. Pope Francis will arrive in Uganda today on the second leg of his visit to East Africa. The Pope has spent 3 days in Kenya, where he encouraged reconciliation between Christians and Muslims. Ugandans are looking forward to welcoming the Catholic Pontiff.
The Pearl of Africa, Uganda's tagline for investors and tourists. And like pearls, the country's 14 million Catholics, about 42% of the population, believe they are precious and desirable to the biggest Christian church in the world. Further proof of that, Uganda is home to 24 Catholic martyrs that the church recognizes as people who died for their faith, and in whose name this shrine was built, and from where Pope Francis will celebrate Mass at the weekend.
The Pope has come to celebrate faith of our ancestors, and he has also come to renew his faith. So he comes with us so that he invites Ugandans to constantly renew their faith in God and in the church.
The Pontiff arrives in the middle of an election campaign. Ugandans want him to also pray for those that want to run this country for at least another 5 years. Yoweri Museveni, who has been ruling this country for almost 30 years now, looks set for yet another landslide.
If the Pope can pray to us, and we have leaders who can at least help us, and if we have some good limits, term limits, see, African leaders, they always want to lead and lead with no stopping.
Uganda have been facing a lot of corruption. Those people who are in the government are corrupt. I beg the Pope to pray for the people, to pray for those guys who are corrupt so that they stop corruption.
While Ugandans were busy putting finishing touches to their preparatory work, getting ready to take over from where Kenya would have left on Friday, elsewhere in the world, doubting Thomases were still skeptical of the Pontiff's decision to visit, quote, war-torn Africa.
Africa is very secure. Africa is stable. Africa is making tremendous progress. There are a few isolated areas where there may be some problems. Tell me which continent does not have problems. Is it Europe? No.
Pope Francis arrives in Uganda on Friday evening. Vuyo Mvogo, SABC News, Kampala, Uganda.
Yeah, I spoke to our correspondent, Julius Mugambwa, in Kampala, Uganda, and this is what he said about the papal's visit.
joyous mood here in Kampala. Right behind me is where the Pope is expected to meet the youth. Now, you might understand that Uganda has one of the world's biggest population of the youth. More than 50% of the country's population are youth. And now, if the Pope is here to meet the youth, is here to strengthen the faith among these people now who build the base of the church. There's a strong following of the Catholic Church in Uganda. You understand more than 40% of the people here are Catholics. And that brings us to 14 million people who are following the Catholic faith. And the Pope coming here, and we know he's been preaching peace. He's been preaching reconciliation in the country. Sorry, in Africa, in Kenya, where he's been, is urging people to tolerate each other, people to learn to believe in each other, people to extend friendship to each other, especially the needy. Everyone knows Pope Francis as one who has been close to the poor people. When he became Pope, he announced it very clear that this is a charge for the poor. And we believe when he comes to Uganda, he's going to send out that very message to the many Ugandans who are waiting for him. To know that, okay, the country is going into elections, the region is challenged with terrorism and all those ideological differences, the interreligious wars in Central African Republic. And we imagine if the Pope gets up to speak, he will send out that message.
We'll keep you posted on the Pope's visit to Africa. Meanwhile, President Jacob Zuma has welcomed the ambassadors and the high commissioners from Europe, South America, Africa and the Middle East. They all presented their credentials to the president last night.
15 countries, including the European Union, strengthening economic and political relations with South Africa. The new ambassadors and high commissioners arriving at a time when acts of terrorism are on the rise. The first to present his credentials, the Zambian High Commissioner, a country with historic relations to South Africa dating back to the liberation struggle against apartheid.
Our unwavering support and active participation in the liberation struggle was driven by the principle that if any part of Africa was not free, we as Zambians and the frontline states were not free.
In receiving them, the president assured them about the importance of their states to South Africa. President Zuma says he's encouraged by the G20 countries' commitment in finding a lasting solution to the refugee crisis.
We acknowledge that management of refugees is an immediate challenge. However, we all have a responsibility to address the root causes of this crisis.
President Zuma reminded them about the need for partnerships in addressing the challenges of climate change, political instability and the economy.
The Basic Education Department says that government will continue to administer the assessments, that's the ANAs, without the teachers. That statement comes after various teacher unions formally agreed to boycott the administration of the assessments, which were due to begin nationwide yesterday. Meanwhile, the National Teachers Union says it is part of a coalition of teachers' unions that have boycotted the administration of the ANAs. The union says a mediation process with the Basic Education Department collapsed last month after a draft agreement with the unions was rejected.
We trust that our teachers will administer ANA because we gave them any day between yesterday and the 4th of December. And we still believe that even those that have not administered it yet, they will get around to doing so, because we understand that schools are still busy with other things like exams, for example. We say they must make time to accommodate ANA any day between yesterday and the 4th of December, which is next week Friday.
Okay, so you can hear the department is not moving, they're not changing on this, and it's going to be happening. So are teachers adamant that they're not going to administer?
Well, in fact, it's not necessarily that teachers do not want, but the problem is timing. During this part of the year, what we do, we are busy with reports, schedules, completing marking of the scripts. We've been writing the end of the year examination. Some of the schools are getting ready to sort of receive those who will be coming to the marking centers. It's time that is not available. And secondly, we have indicated that we want a new kind of a national assessment, which is going to take care of the need. We have been assessing since 2011, and there's nothing that has been done. We want intervention program. We want strategies on how to assist learners to pass, on how to assist teachers to make better sort of teaching in the classroom.
But we have used ANA for many things, including the implementation of a 1+4 model, which we use to train teachers to improve their teaching skills around maths, science and technology. We have also given teachers about 20 million rand annually to make sure that they go for training, because we understand that Anna tells us as well that there are problems in the classroom in terms of the teaching levels, and we have used Anna to make those improvements. We also established a maths and science and technology unit at the Department of Basic Education, which is something that we didn't have before. And we got around to doing that because Anna told us that there was a need to do that.
The Basic Education Department has confirmed that an investigation into a matric exam paper that was leaked has been handed to the Hawks. Now, more than 17,000 matrics in Limpopo will be forced to rewrite 2 life science examination papers following an exam paper leak in the province more than a week ago. The department say that 17,500 learners are set to rewrite following that special task team's investigation. The department's spokesperson, Elijah Mshlanga, says an official close to the examination process reportedly leaked the paper to the learners, who in turn then distributed to their friends via social media. The department says 15,000 pupils are from the Vembe school district in Limpopo. The decision was taken after copies of the exams were leaked on social media and WhatsApp. 5 pupils from Gauteng and 2 from Mpumalanga have also been implicated. Further afield now, French mourners mark 1 week since the Paris attacks at Bataclan Concert Hall that killed 129 people across the French capital. Rain could not even deter the crowd from gathering to remember and honor their loved ones. A sea of flowers, candles, photos and drawings flowed into the sidewalk in front of the Bataclan Concert Hall, where 3 gunmen strapped with explosives stormed the venue of a rock concert, took hostages and then killed scores of people in the biggest loss of life during Friday's violence last Friday. People continued to visit the makeshift shrine despite the heavy rain that fell throughout the afternoon. The French president's office announced on Friday that the nation would pay homage to the victims of the Paris attacks, which would take place on November the 27th today. The victims of the attack, the deadliest in France since World War II, came from 17 different countries. Many of them young people, out on a Friday night at bars and restaurants, a concert hall and a football stadium. Islamic State says it carried out the attacks in retaliation for French air raids on its positions. The climate change conference in Paris, fighting terrorism that is plaguing many parts of the world, and the rights of women and girl children are expected to dominate discussions at the Commonwealth Heads of State and Government meeting, which is taking place in Malta. International Relations and Corporations Minister Maitinokwani Mishabane will now represent the President, Jacob Zuma, who is expected to fly to Paris to attend the Climate Change Conference, or COP21.
An island nation located south of Italy and north of Africa, this country of 500,000 people has served as a bridge between Europe and Africa. It's hosting this meeting for the second time since 2005. Much is expected from the more than 50 nations. Though not binding, discussions are expected to feed into the Paris Climate Change Summit.
For us, a successful COP21 would enhance the Durban platform of action which we adopted when we hosted UNFCCC conference in South Africa. The next issue that is being focused on here now, there will be a statement issued by the heads of states and government at the conclusion of the meeting on encouraging a positive outcome. So we debated what would be the positive outcome.
Ironically, Paris will remain the focus. Having experienced terrorist attacks in the past 2 weeks and hosting the COP21 summit, French President François Hollande will address the summit.
In individual countries, maybe there's a need for us to look at the root causes of this and what encourages young people to become so desperate, because religion alone is no longer a convincing answer that this is what we are looking at.
The head of the Commonwealth Queen Elizabeth II, who arrived in Malta, will open the gathering. Whilst discussions of the Commonwealth nations are not binding, they serve as the guidelines on international issues. This body is renowned for having put pressure on the international community to isolate apartheid South Africa in the 1980s. Mzondi Lembech, SABC News, Valletta, Malta.
On home front now, there's no serious rain predicted for the province of Limpopo this weekend. In the past 2 weekends, the province was hit by heavy rains that was characterized by hailstorms, destroying homes and public infrastructure. The Vembed district was the hardest hit. The district municipality estimates the number of affected households at just below 2,000. It took up to 5 days for the affected communities to get help from the government. Kaugelo Magolegwa is in Polokwane to give us an update. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, and thank you very much for having me.
Kaugelo, can you tell us what has the weather been like this week in Limpopo? Is there any sign of any rain?
No, not at all. There's not been any predictions. In fact, in the past couple of days, as well as today, the temperatures have been going as high as 40, 41 around there. Pretty hot, really.
Now, after the devastating rains you guys had there, how's it going with the affected communities? Are they managing to fix the ruins?
Yes, well, it's taking time in that government takes time to get to the people. They first have to audit how many households have been affected, what is the nature of the damage, and so on. But I must say that in all cases where we've been to, we found that the villagers were actually working hard on their own to rebuild their own homes, to make sure in some cases we've seen communities even trying to contribute as much as they can towards fixing of schools that have been affected and so on. So whatever has been coming from government actually found them along the way trying to stand up on their own.
What is government saying? What have you heard? Why the delays in assisting these communities?
Well, in this week we have focused more on the Vembe district since there were so many households affected in that district alone. And what the officials indicated to us was that although this was an emergency situation in that people found themselves suddenly homeless, the municipality, both at the local district level as well as the provincial government, were still subjected to the same red tape that is the case in terms of with any other service delivery processes. If you had to get so many documents signed before you can use a state vehicle or before you can use funds and so on. Red tape that gives us what appears to us to be a delay. In their terms, they say that it's not a delay. In fact, they say that in law, they are given up to 72 hours to react in case there's such a tragedy.
Mm-hmm. And if you look at the devastating families in the area, where are they being housed currently?
There are no central points where we could say people had been housed there. What has happened was that where they were at the very same house that had been destroyed, they would then be allocated a tent and food right there and there. Mm-hmm. There's not been schools or community halls used for the purpose of housing people as we have seen in the past.
And what about schools and infrastructure? Are the children going to school?
In one case, in the Malamulele area, early this week, they had to postpone a grade 7 examination because the school had been damaged over the weekend, which also affected the administrative office, which had a photocopy machine inside. So basically, they could not print the question paper that was needed for that day, and they had to postpone examinations. There's been another case in Sikukune where learners were simply accommodated another nearby school. In that case, it was a high school that was affected, but the department did manage to get there on a Monday and move the learners to a nearby school where they could write their examination.
Thank you, Kaugelo, for that update. That was our reporter on the scene, Kaugelo Magolegwa in Limpopo, giving us the latest there. Well, we'll be taking a break and we'll be right back. after that.
Hi, just brushing up on my party. We are going to make it number 12, official. Let me teach you a quick word.
Yeah.
Quite a star. A woman who has mastered the art of dancing in high heels. It's up and flick.
Get a bottle of Glenfiddich 12-year-old with 2 glasses for only $3.99.99 and help make party South Africa's 12th official language. Tops at Spa. Shake things up.
The road to greatness is not an easy one. It's rough, tough, and full of barriers. And there's only one way to master it. Never, ever stop. Dauntless. The all-new Audi Q7.
Technology is all around us and is improving lives across Africa, like how young Nigerians are connecting to the internet. There are doctors finding new ways to save lives in Cameroon, and the South African public transport system that is now getting Wi-Fi. We have gadgets, apps and loads more, some of which play a big role in Africa's growth. A huge part of this African growth is technological innovation. To find out a bit more about social media and technology news from here in Africa and abroad, join me, Phumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. on SABC News.
Good morning and welcome back. I'm Kendall Makhamat and I've got your sports on Newsroom. Now, our top story for today is about football, and it's just over 2 days before the final of the African Confederation Cup final between South Africa's Orlando Pirates and Tunisia's Etoile du Sahel in Tunisia. However, the intention is not only on the match, but it's also on the security concerns ahead of the game in the North African country. On Wednesday, Tunisia declared a state of emergency across the country following a bomb blast that killed at least 12 people in the capital of Tunis. Though the match will be played at the coastal city of Sousse, the Confederation of African Football has announced that the game will be moved from 8 p.m. to 4 p.m. South African time because of security concerns. And to discuss and find out how safe it is for the African Confederation Cup final to go on, we're now joined by the Tunisian ambassador to South Africa, Mr. Mohamed Ayari, who's in our Pretoria studios. Good morning, sir, and thank you for joining us on Newsroom.
Thank you very much for welcoming me.
Mr. Ayari, we want to thank you very much for chatting. And the big thing for us is, how bad is the security situation in Tunisia?
Well, Tunisia has been struck this year 3 times by terrorists. The first time against the Bardo Museum in March. The second time was in Sousse in end of June. And the third time was 2 days ago in the capital city of Tunis. This is really a bad thing, but we have taken all measures to, to upgrade security in all the country, and that's why the state of emergency has been declared. So Tunisian authorities, Tunisian security forces are on the lookout for any other attempts to prevent any further attacks against our people.
Now, before I carry on any further, Mr. Ambassador, I think I need to let you know that our condolences do go out to all the families that have lost lives in this tragic incident. And because for us, it's quite a big thing such things happen. And the security measures in place to make sure that the match goes on and is safe for the fans as well as the teams that will be going on to the match. What have you got in place for that, sir?
this is not the first time that we welcome in Tunisia for sports teams, sports delegations. For even Orlando Pirates played again. Played twice. Once against Espérance Sportive de Tunis, and the second time against CS Sfaxia, and they were very well welcomed. They found all the facilities available for a good stay, and I'm sure this time also everything will be in accordance with the security measures to make sure that the Orlando Pirates team will be welcomed and will have a good stay and will play a good football on Sunday. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm not at all worried about security situation. And as far as South African delegation, the Sports Orlando Pirates delegation, or even the supporters of Orlando Pirates are concerned. So as I said, our people are very well used to welcoming sports delegations, and let me assure you that the Orlando Pirates team, their supporters, will be in total security. There will be no mishaps this time.
Mr. Ambassador, the match will be taking place in the city of Sousse, and it was moved forward from 8 p.m. South African time to 4 p.m. South African time. Was that in light of the curfew that's been put in place, or was it specific to certain intelligence that had been received?
No, it's obvious that to play during the daylight is much better for security reasons, and since the curfew has been adopted, then it's better to play at 4 o'clock, South African time, but 3 o'clock Tunisian time. So it's much better to play at 4 o'clock, and so that security forces can be on the lookout and provide all security measures which will be needed during the time of play, and I'm sure everything will be okay, as I said earlier on.
Mr. Ambassador, and our very last question on a much lighter note. I want to thank you very much for having shared your thoughts on the security situation and how safe the players will be, as well as any travelling fans. On a lighter note, who do you expect to win the match on Sunday afternoon?
Let me tell you that I was in the stadium, Orlando Stadium, and let me first say we really appreciate all the conditions provided for a good stay of this Étoile du Sahel delegation. They were very well received. Everything was impeccable. So I hope that this Étoile Sportive du Sahel, and I'm sure they will reciprocate. The game was a tough one. The two teams played good football, and I'm sure the two teams will have chances to win the trophy. Étoile Sportive du Sahel, maybe they scored the away goal, which is very important in these conditions. But Orlando Pirates, the players, they have always showed very good talent abroad. Yes. And the last time was against Al Ahly, the mighty Al Ahly of Egypt. So I'm expecting a very tough game. You cannot win until after the 90 minutes, and I'm sure both teams stand chances to win the trophy this time. As I said, I hope all the conditions will be met by the Étoile Sportive du Sahel officials to welcome the brothers from South Africa. And I am, as a Tunisian ambassador to South Africa, I'm expecting a very tough game, but I'm sure fair play will prevail, and the better team will win this trophy this time.
Ambassador Mohamed Ayari from Tunisia to South Africa, thank you so much for giving us this time. Obviously, an avid football fan.
Oh, definitely. Thank you so much. Thank you for welcoming me.
Now, there you have it, the ambassador to South Africa from Tunisia. Now, we've got Lebohang Dube, SABC reporter in the city of Sousse, Tunisia, to give us an idea of what it's like on the ground where the match is going to be playing. Lebohang, good morning and thanks for joining us.
Morning, Kendall, and morning to the viewers.
When did you arrive and what have you experienced since arriving there?
Kendall, we arrived yesterday afternoon, and one thing that I can confirm is that there is a high, the visibility of police, traveling from Tunis, the capital, to Sousse. You can see that they're taking the security or the safety issue very seriously. Currently, we were here at the Stade Olympique where the match will be taking place, trying to come and take a couple of shots so that we can take back home. And we were stopped by the police and refusing us to take visuals of the stadium. Clearly, it's a matter of safety. So in terms of safety, the police presence is highly visible.
Right. Now, just a quick one now. With regards to the general mood, I just spoke to the ambassador to South Africa from Tunisia. He reckons like everything is going okay in terms of security measures. And is that your feeling? Is there fear or is the mood calm?
No, the mood is calm. It's very calm, and you can see that people that I've been talking to, they're excited about the match, and hopefully, there will be a lot of people attending the match. Although there will be a certain number of people allowed. I think the maximum is 15,000 in the 30,000 seats, and basically it's a matter of security. But in terms of the mood, I think people are excited about the match, and they are aware that Orlando Pirates are a force to be reckoned with, and they are expecting a tough match.
Lebo, I've got less than 30 seconds to wrap this up. Quickly, what time did the team arrive, and do they train today?
The team is expected to land in Tunis at around 12:30 this afternoon and arrive in Sousse around 3:30. In terms of training, the coach will make a decision whether he will take the players for a run. However, I think they will be a bit tired, so maybe the first training session will be tomorrow morning.
Lebohang Dube from SABC out in Sousse, the city where the match is going to be played, joining us there to tell us about the mood on the ground. Thanks very much for that. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll bring you more news. But before we go anywhere, just to let you know, Proteas put up a good stand. They're currently sitting 140-6 in the 74th over. Hashim Amla and Faf du Plessis doing what they needed to do, getting a partnership, but Amla was bowled out a little while ago. More about all of that a little later.
Health Talk, your show on health practice.
The people being empowered with knowledge so that they can change their behavior and reduce their risk of being sick.
How serious is stress at work?
If we don't address workplace stress, that negative stress, then it can lead to burnout and it can lead to depression.
How does absentees affect companies?
The one that's really problematic for employers is the one that is unscheduled.
How can companies organize their wellness program?
Health promotion mustn't just be a one-size-fits-all type of approach. It must be customized based on understanding of the unique needs of that particular organization.
For health tips that will help you to adopt healthy living with Dr. Sillo Mutawung on Health Talk every Saturday.
Welcome back. Time for us now to shift the focus to what is happening on the African continent. Here are your top stories. The head of the Roman Catholic Church, Pope Francis, will arrive in Uganda on the second leg of his Africa tour later today. Uganda is on high alert following recent terror attacks in other African countries in the region. However, security forces say measures are in place to secure the Pope's visit. The Pope is expected to teach young people that violence and hate in God's name is unjustified. He will lead a mass on Saturday where as many as 2 million people are expected to attend. More than 1 million children in the Central African Republic are in urgent need of humanitarian aid, while almost half of those under the age of 5 are malnourished. This, according to the United Nations Children Fund, and comes just days before Pope Francis' visit to the conflict-torn nation. The mostly Christian nation plunged into turmoil when mostly Muslim rebels briefly seized power in 2013. Sectarian violence has plagued the country ever since, and fresh fighting broke out in the capital, Bangui. 2 months ago. Boko Haram militants have killed 18 people, including a local religious leader, in an attack on a village there. The village situated in Niger's southern border area of Diffa along the Nigerian border was attacked by gunmen who fired on residents and attacked their homes. Niger's Diffa region has suffered dozens of cross-border strikes this year by Boko Haram, who are based in the northeast of Nigeria, just a few kilometers away. A state of emergency has been declared in the region in an attempt to boost security. And on a lighter note, the winner of Zimbabwe's Mr. Ugly has been deemed too handsome this year. But to win this pageant, being ugly, they say, is not enough. Judges are looking for competitors to be creative and stylish as well. The winner, William Masvinu, was ousted and replaced by the almost toothless Maizonser, who apparently put in a lot more effort. Officials told a local paper that they plan to make Mr. Ugly a global contest now. Very interesting. Anyhow, the rise in extremism in the Middle East, Africa, and more recently in Europe following the Paris attack that left more than 120 people dead is raising global safety concerns. Now, earlier this week, I spoke with political and economic analyst Israel Mkhizi about this and asked him about the recent announcement by the United Nations Security Council about their resolution to fight against global terror.
It means that the economics of war is taking rather a different shape now. Because you look at the countries that are making the top 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, you see that in different ways they are quite dominating in their regions in terms of continental location. Number 2, in their economic zones, for instance, you have 3 that are, I think, belong in the European Union. And then you've got 1 that belongs to BRICS, which is China. And then you've got America, which is the leading economy in the world. So with the declaration that there is going to be now an all-out fight against what you call terrorism, through terror as well, because bombing is terrorizing.
It's terrorizing innocent communities across affected countries.
Yeah, it goes back to what when President Nixon and also Henry Kissinger were coming out of office. A very new concept came out in America, which was called that the countries and the governments must look and watch out for the military-industrial complex, which, if you are a candidate, for instance, in the United States of America for presidency, I used to wonder, why is it important if you've been to the war or the army? Until I understood the deep connection between the supply of arms, the supply of war, and the exportation of war with the banking sector, and with the economic sector.
The wider effect on the U.S. economy, one can argue that whenever the economy has been in trouble in the U.S., war has come along to solve that problem.
As an element that boosts, for instance, local demand within the arms industry, exportation and the proliferation within America itself.
I want to ask you about the current global events that we've seen. How is it going to rearrange global cooperation, particularly on the question of trade and the distribution of goods?
Well, it's going to, obviously, 1, it has affected the tourism industry. Number 2, if you look, let's use the America and the recent lifting up of the sanctions. It's was this country in South America where there had been Cuba. There had been tensions for years, but the tensions were ideologically oriented. Now, when you look at the tensions that have been between America and European Union countries and Russia, they have been based on the question of ideology. And Russia had been seen as a posing enemy. Now, that affected how Russia, you saw at the beginning of the year, how they played the currency wars on Russia and how you saw the currency of Russia almost taking a fall. And now what you see is that Russia also played its card because it's got a strength in the supply of gas and energy. In Europe, they are the biggest major supplier. So with the fall of ideological tensions, as we saw during the Cold War between China and America, when Kissinger was sent as the first person, I think around 1971, to go and visit China, you saw that at the fall of the ideological tensions, when the Berlin Wall fell around 78, 79, when the ideological questions or tensions, they fell, there was an opening up between trades between Germany and America, between China and America. So what we might see now is that there can be more conversation between Russia and the European countries on the question of the distribution of goods. Because, again, when you look at the geography in the Middle East, what's going on in Syria, Syria is just next to Saudi Arabia, and there's other countries like Jordan and Israel. You notice that how some of these countries have been competing, who is having more supply of arms to the Syrian government. You know, Russia has been leading, claiming to be leading in supplying Assad with weapons. Now, the thing is with the theory of peace and economics is that you find that sometimes peace becomes a liability to other sectors of society. Especially in the proliferation of arms, where they say when there's peace in the world, there is low demand for our commodity, which is
you say
arms.
Peace is not good for business. Unfortunately,
during the time of war, it is not good for
unfortunately,
business.
Israel, that's not what we need to hear. I want to ask, because the Pope is on the African continent this week, and the Pope is here to bring peace and tolerance. This is the message. So that in itself, you say, is bad for business. But tell me about your take on the Pope's visit. Is it a soft touch towards reconciliation, that message?
Well, you remember that the Pope actually the Catholic Church, for over 1,500 years, they were the United Nations institution of the world, which came just after the Bretton Woods conversation around 43 and 44. And it was just, realism politics, as we'd call it, just took place after Machiavelli's thinking and rationalizing hard power in politics. Then the church took a bit of a backseat in administrating arbitrating world and global peace. So the coming of the Pope, in my view, it's in a way trying to use those sentimental appeals, those ethical appeals, to say, look, let us try to calm down and at least use conversation to combat extremism and terror rather than using other types of forces.
These forces are very much at play on the African continent right now. Israel, I want to talk about the AU quickly before we wrap up. Now, the AU is nominated to receive a peace award. How do you view this in the light of the conflict that we see throughout the continent?
Well, on one hand, we've got ongoing pockets in Africa which are not at rest. You've got Burundi, you've got Sudan, you've got Egypt recently. But on the other hand, the AU's argument was that there is no country in Africa that is at war with another country, which is what you don't see in the Middle East and in Europe. You're seeing European countries being at war with other countries. So I think the emphasis was on that interstate conflicts have been resolved. So it's only those pockets of extremism and unrest which usually comes as an aftermath of constitutional mismanagement of the election eras and recent post-elections.
Israel, thank you very much for joining us again. Yeah, always nice to have Israel with us. This week, Israel leaves us with a message. He says, peace is not good for business. This is the capitalist principle that he's leaving us today with. Thank you very much. Israel Mkhize is a resident economic and political analyst right here on SABC Newsroom.
Eben there with Israel Mkhize. But right now, let's move on to stories making headlines around the globe and on the world stage. The annual COP21, or the UN Conference of the Parties on Climate Change, kicks off next week and will bring together more than 100 heads of state and representatives from about 200 countries in Paris from the 30th of November to the 11th of December. The overall objective is to hopefully reach an agreement on a global legally binding agreement to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Now, here at home, the good news is that South Africa has narrowly avoided a technical recession, which is defined as 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. This past week saw the South African economy grew by 1.4%, but the outlook for 2015, though better than 2014, is not encouraging. and was slightly lower than the market's expectation of 1.5%. That 1.4% growth for the third quarter was largely owed to increased economic activity in finance, in real estate, business services, and wholesale, retail, and motor trade. Now, to discuss this and other factors relating to the economy, we are joined by economist Professor Raymond Parsons from the Northwest University Business School in our weekly Parsons Economic Perspective, or PEP Talk. A very good morning to you, Professor, and welcome.
Hi, Elvis.
Now, we have seen this now happening on the world stage. COP21 is on our doorstep next weekend, or next week rather. So let's start off with that. More than 100 heads of state and, of course, 200 representatives will meet in Paris. Can we expect a binding agreement there, Professor?
Well, Elvis, let me start by saying this is an important conference, as they always are, to decarbonize energy in the world, which is really its overarching goal. I cannot help but, in lighter vein, say at the outset, they're expecting, if I understand it correctly, about 40,000 delegates. So I would like to know what the carbon footprint is of all those who are traveling to a climate change conference. But let's be more serious. I think the challenge here is, how do we get what I would call a Goldilocks temperature for the world? Not too hot and not too cold. That's the big challenge. And of course, what the countries of the world are really dedicated to is to see whether, to the extent that in fact humankind is adding to the problem, what can we do as a world and as a country? Now, it's not that easy, of course. One has to apply some reality tests, even if you do recognize what the problem is. And there's a clear dividing line here, I think, between the developed countries, which are able to control their emissions much better, and the developing countries who, because they are growing, are generating more of the carbon emissions and can least afford to do what has to be done, whether it's a carbon tax or other emission controls. So quite clearly, global cooperation is essential, and that's, of course, very difficult. And what's more, this conference is in fact meeting at a time when the world is also preoccupied with certain other issues. For example, the whole issue of terrorism, and this conference is also in Paris.
Yes.
And secondly, of course, we're not happy about the performance of the world economy, so there's quite a lot of concern in Europe and in China about growth and so forth. So I think that as important as this conference is, it will be competing with other things. But nonetheless, it's a very important conference. Each year, it evaluates how far we've got and how much further do we have to go in order to address the challenge of climate change and of global warming.
Now, talking about climate change, and we see some of the pictures there, we see melting ice, and we know that they are gathering to really look at the global temperatures not to rise more than 2%, or 2 degrees Celsius rather, above the pre-industrial levels. Is that a possibility?
Well, they've spoken about hoping to come out of this conference with a legally binding agreement. Now, I've got to say to myself, well, I think that doesn't sound very probable, because remember, all those heads of states that you've listed, the 100 that will be there, apart from all the other delegates, once you go down the road of something that's legally binding, there are also financial implications, there are cost implications, and we mustn't overlook that. Otherwise, we could wave a wand and then we could just correct the situation. The fact is, they've all got to go back to their parliaments, all to go back to their congresses and say, are you prepared to commit yourself to a legally binding contract about climate change? I think that's going to be a big challenge at this particular conference. But it's very important, I think, to have regular conferences at which you evaluate where you are, and indeed what more can or should be done as far as climate change is concerned.
Now, back here at home, we narrowly escaped the technical recession. Firstly, explain the concept of recession first to the listeners again, so we can get that, and the Parsons perspective on what happened this week.
Can I just add, before we do that, but it's also domestic, that we have made a contribution to the agenda on climate change, and we've said, firstly, that there must be indeed global cooperation. No one country can do this on their own, and you cannot approach it on the basis of that one size fits all. And secondly, you must understand that the curve of climate change, when you're committed to doing something about it, you have a peak, you have a plateau, and then you have a decline. Now, we've undertaken to reduce our emissions by 34% by 2020 and by something like 45% by 2025. I really think we've got to be realistic here. We are a developing country. We can't be at the cutting edge here. We can play our part, indeed, but issues like a carbon tax, for example, we're the only developing country that is taking that seriously at the moment. And in fact, Judge Dennis Davis has himself said, look, this is important, but not now.
But there's financial implications there.
Of course. And we have other more important challenges at the moment that we're going to deal with now that have to be addressed. So as important as green technology and the green economy as part of our future, we must not forget there are other pressing issues that we have to deal with.
Some analysts call it the great escape here for us, the technical recession. Let me hear your take on that, the Parsons perspective.
Well, I think two extra pieces of information I must share with you that have occurred in the past 24 hours is firstly that the Rand Merchant Bank Stellenbosch index of business confidence has fallen to its lowest level in 5 years. And the Reserve Bank's leading indicators, which look ahead 6 or 9 months for the last one, which was just published for September, also shows a decline. So I think we've got to understand that these forecasts that, yes, we've avoided a recession. Of course, for some people out there, it might still feel like one, even if the numbers don't indicate it, because our growth rate this year, I doubt very much whether it's going to be more than 1.3%. Next year, possibly the same. I think we're into a 2-year tough period to get out of this low growth trap. And how many jobs can you create with a 1.3 growth rate?
Not many.
What can the Minister of Finance do if he finds that his tax revenues are starting to dry up because they're not being supported by a higher growth rate? So there are some big challenges. And I think the important point here is also, although we recognize these difficulties, it's not all bad news. I mean, I would like to make the point that, firstly, at least we know the oil prices dropped together with our other commodity prices, of course, so it hits us on the export front. But nonetheless, we can expect that our petrol prices will be low. I think if we have to import food, I think food prices in the world are low, so that's a positive. And above all, Elvis, the point is we're not without remedies. But I think the perception is that we're either not implementing them or we're adopting the wrong remedies. And I think that's the positive that we really have to address.
A final thought, Professor?
Well, going back to Paris, I would say, as I said earlier, there's no magic wand about climate change. I would only suggest that it would be better if the conference was to end, at least it is better that it starts with a degree of skepticism rather than it ends in a degree of skepticism, and that will lie in the hands of the delegates in Paris.
Professor, as usual, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
That was Professor Raymond Parsons from the Northwest University Business School in our weekly pep talk, or Parsons' Economic Perspective. That's where we got to leave it for now. Titsi Munari is standing by with your weather forecast.
All right, let's have a look at your African weather, and it looks like we're expecting again a bit of rain towards southern Africa, especially if you're going to be in KwaZulu-Natal. Do expect up to 60% chance of showers along the coastal part of KwaZulu-Natal, and then it will be moving all the way towards the northern part and moving into the central regions of Zimbabwe, some parts of Botswana, and definitely also over that northeastern corner of Namibia. If you're going to be in the southern parts of Angola, also expect the possibilities of showers. We're expecting some rain also towards that northern part of Madagascar. Isolated and thunder showers will be coming through over those parts. If you're in South Africa, please do be careful and look out for severe thunderstorms over the northwest province, some parts of the Free State and Gauteng, definitely over Limpopo as well. Please do look out for those. And then you'll see temperatures are quite hot over the Western Coast District as we're expecting veld fire conditions along those parts. Those could be quite deadly in terms of heat strokes. So please do be extra careful and make sure you are protected expected if you are working outside or if you are doing some workouts outside. Bloemfontein will reach a maximum of around 29 degrees, much cooler weather for KwaZulu-Natal, as well as over much of the southern interior. You can see by the bluish shade here, it is indicating really cooler conditions that are expected over the next couple of days. But nice and hot weather for Lusaka, 36, 37 towards Gaborone. And you're also seeing possibilities of temperatures slightly increasing into the upper 20s for Kampala. If you are heading there, I do expect temperatures to be nice and warm. Kigali is at around a 30% chance of rain, but increasing ever so as you move on later into the afternoon as well as tomorrow. You can see by the darker shades here, possibilities of severe thunderstorms coming in over the southern part of the DRC, going all the way towards Central African Republic, as well as over the western side, further up north into the Congo, some parts of Gabon, as well as all the way into the southern regions of Cameroon. Do expect rainy weather today as well as tomorrow, possibly into the rest of the weekend as well. Temperatures are expected to be quite hot for places such as Bangui. It goes as high as around 38 degrees. Bangui has been quite hot for the last couple of days. Juba over the southern part of Sudan is also expected to be hot. I do expect cooler weather, though, for Addis Ababa and the rest of Ethiopia, going all the way towards Djibouti. But then Somalia is expected to be a bit hot, around 31 for Mogadishu. Mombasa as well in Kenya. Nairobi will drop down to 23 degrees. Nice and hot weather for Lilongwe as well, including the rest of Malawi. I expect slightly warmer conditions. If you're going to be in a Blantyre as well as over the surrounding areas of Lake Malawi, do expect temperatures to also be into the lower 30s. Some of them will be into the upper 20s. And Luanda will be at 29 degrees over the far western side. Now, rainfall for the northern regions is, as usual, expected to be very, very low. Nothing is happening over the central part and over much of the Sahara Desert, which is quite normal. Just hot weather is what you can expect along those parts. And a bit of rain towards Saudi Arabia, as well as over the northern parts of Djibouti, going all the way towards Port Sudan. That's where you can expect just a little bit of clouds, build-up of rain, and moisture is expected to extend today, going into tomorrow. Otherwise, clear and dry conditions are expected. We also do expect possibilities of temperatures into the upper teens for places such as Baghdad, as well as over Benghazi, going to Tripoli, as well as over Seban. So you can understand that it's wintry conditions along those parts. So it is expected to be quite cool. And then rain is expected along the coastal parts of West Africa. That's all I leave it for your weather, but do stay tuned. There'll be more throughout the day.
Your World makes it its business every evening to round up the leading local stories and international news to keep you informed all the time.
Make a date with Your World every evening for all the news headlines around the world to keep you abreast with knowledge.
Catch Your World for headlines across the world every Monday to Friday from 9 p.m, then Saturday and Sunday from 7 p.m.
I'm sorry, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, we have been banned.
It didn't happen to me on that day because I was already in jail when it happened.
I was scared that when I get back to Joburg, I was going to be arrested. Well, I wasn't. Who are you asking? You're looking at me.
Yes, Zubaida, I'm talking to you.
So the old fuddy daddies like Dennis and me will remain there.
I just want to say, Joe, that the thing about... damn, go on, and it's coming back to me.
So much more than just the Legal and Rights show. Join Dumile Mateza every Sunday at 2 p.m. only on the SABC News channel.
In Africa, technology has created many new ways of doing things.
ICT is an increasingly important part of everybody's life.
It's being used in education, for social media, and now for farming too.
The best thing about internet for a farmer is that you get to share information.
On Network, we give you all the important African technology and social media news. That's Network with Ms. Phumelele Zondi every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time, only on SABC News.
It's 1100 hours Central Africa time on this Friday, the 27th of November 2015. This is Newsroom, Jumbo Africa, and a very warm welcome to the final hour. I'm Elvis Preston. I'll be with you until 12 o'clock. You'll have to stay with us as we broadcast live from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. But first, let's take a look at all your news headlines. Pope Francis will arrive in Uganda today on the second leg of his visit to East Africa. President Jacob Zuma has called for more cooperation among African countries in supporting anti-terrorism initiatives. And France is set to hold a national memorial service today for the 130 people who died in the Paris attacks 2 weeks ago. But before we get to your top story, let's find out from Kendo Makamate what's happening in the sports field. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, Elvis. Quite a lot happening this morning in terms of cricket. But before I get too far ahead of myself, let's give our viewers a good morning and a hello as well, and let you know exactly what's in store for you in the sports today. Orlando Pirates to play for glory in Tunisia amidst security concerns after the latest terror attacks in Tunis.
Very admirable. 31
the Proteas show a bit of steel on day 2 of their third test in Nagpur, defending well and batting through the overs.
With a pink ball.
The historic first day-night test is underway at the Adelaide Oval between Australia and New Zealand. And that in a nutshell is what we've got for you in the sports. Make sure you stick around for that at 11:30 or so. Back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. Let's start off now with our top story. SABC Chief Operating Officer Hlaudi Motsoeneng's permanent appointment has been set aside by the Western Cape High Court. Several weeks ago, the Democratic Alliance went to court to have Motsoeneng's appointment declared unlawful. A short while ago, Judge Dennis Davis handed down judgment in the case. Motsoeneng is currently on special leave pending a disciplinary hearing. This comes after the recent suspension of the SABC Group Chief Executive, Frans Matlala. Pope Francis will arrive in Uganda today on the second leg of his visit to East Africa. The Pope has spent 3 days in Kenya, where he encouraged reconciliation between Christians and Muslims. Ugandans are looking forward to welcoming the Catholic Pontiff.
The Pearl of Africa. Uganda's tagline for investors and tourists. And like pearls, the country's 14 million Catholics, about 42% of the population, believe they are precious and desirable to the biggest Christian church in the world. Further proof of that, Uganda is home to 24 Catholic martyrs that the church recognizes as people who died for their faith, and in whose name this shrine was built, and from where Pope Francis will celebrate Mass at the weekend.
The Pope has come to celebrate faith of our ancestors, and he has also come to renew his faith. So he comes with us so that he invites Ugandans to constantly renew their faith in God and in the church.
The Pontiff arrives in the middle of an election campaign. Ugandans want him to also pray for those that want to run this country for at least another 5 years. Yoweri Museveni, who has been ruling this country for almost 30 years now, looks set for yet another landslide.
If the Pope can pray to us, and we have leaders who can at least help us, and if we have some good limits, term limits, see African leaders, they always want to lead and lead with no stopping.
Uganda have been facing a lot of corruption. Those people who are in the government are corrupt. I beg the Pope to pray for the people, to pray for those guys who are corrupt so that they stop corruption.
While Ugandans were busy putting finishing touches to their preparatory work, getting ready to take over from where Kenya would have left on Friday, elsewhere in the world, doubting Thomases were still skeptical of the Pontiff's decision to visit, quote, war-torn Africa.
Africa is very secure. Africa is stable. Africa is making tremendous progress. There are a few isolated areas where there may be some problems. Tell me which continent does not have problems. Is it Europe? No.
Pope Francis arrives in Uganda on Friday evening. Vuyo Mvoko, SABC News, Kampala, Uganda.
Earlier, I spoke with our correspondent, Julius Mugambwa, in Kampala, Uganda, and this is what he said about the papal's visit.
It's a very joyous mood here in Kampala. Right behind me is where the Pope is expected to meet the youth. Now, you might understand that Uganda has one of the world's biggest population of the youth. More than 50% of the country's population are youth. And now, if the Pope is here to meet the youth, he's here to strengthen the faith among these people now who build the base of the church. There's a strong following of the Catholic Church in Uganda. You understand more than 40% of the people here are Catholics. And that brings us to 14 million people who are following the Catholic faith. And the Pope coming here, and we know he's been preaching peace. He's been preaching reconciliation in the country. In Africa, in Kenya, where he's been, he's urging people to tolerate each other, people to learn to believe in each other, people to extend friendship to each other, especially the needy. Everyone knows Pope Francis as one who has been close to the poor people. When he became Pope, he announced it very clear that this is a church for the poor. And we believe when he comes to Uganda, he's going to send out that very message to the many Ugandans who are waiting for him. To know that, okay, the country is going into elections, the region is challenged with terrorism and all those ideological differences, the interreligious wars in Central African Republic. And we imagine if the Pope gets up to speak, he will send out that message.
President Jacob Zuma has welcomed the ambassadors and high commissioners from Europe, South America, Africa and the Middle East. They presented their credentials to the president last night.
15 countries, including the European Union, strengthening economic and political relations with South Africa. The new ambassadors and high commissioners arriving at a time when acts of terrorism are on the rise. The first to present his credentials, the Zambian High Commissioner, a country with historic relations to South Africa dating back to the liberation struggle against apartheid.
Our unwavering support and active participation in the liberation struggle was driven by the principle that if any part of Africa was not free, we as Zambians and the frontline states were not free.
In receiving them, the president assured them about the importance of their states to South Africa. President Zuma says he's encouraged by the G20 countries' commitment in finding a lasting solution to the refugee crisis.
We acknowledge that management of refugees is an immediate challenge. However, we all have a responsibility to address the root causes of this crisis.
President Zuma reminded them about the need for partnerships in addressing the challenges of climate change, political instability and the economy.
The Basic Education Department says government will continue to administer the assessment without the teachers. The statement comes after various teacher unions formally agreed to boycott the administration of the assessments, which were due to begin nationwide yesterday. Meanwhile, the National Teachers Union says it is part of a coalition of teachers' unions that have boycotted the administration of the annual national assessments. The union says a mediation process with the Basic Education Department collapsed last month after a draft agreement with the unions was rejected.
We trust that our teachers will administer ANA because we gave them any day between yesterday and the 4th of December. And we still believe that even those that have not administered it yet, they will get around to doing so because we understand that schools are still busy with other things like exams, for example. We say they must make time to accommodate ANA any day between yesterday and the 4th of December, which is next week Friday.
Okay, so you can hear the department is not moving, they're not changing on this, and it's going to be happening. So are teachers adamant that they're not going to administer?
Well, in fact, it's not necessarily that teachers do not want, but the problem is timing. During this part of the year, what we do, we are busy with reports, schedules, completing marking of the scripts. We've been writing the end of the year examination. Some of the schools are getting ready to sort of receive those who will be coming to the marking centers. It's time that is not available. And secondly, we have indicated indicated that we want a new kind of a national assessment, which is going to take care of the need. We've been assessing since 2011, and there's nothing that has been done. We want intervention program. We want strategies on how to assist learners to pass, on how to assist teachers to make better teaching in the classroom.
But we have used ANA for many things, including the implementation of a 1+4 model, which we use to train teachers to improve their teaching skills around maths, science and technology. We have also given teachers about 20 million rand annually to make sure that they go for training, because we understand that ANA tells us as well that there are problems in the classroom in terms of the teaching levels, and we have used ANA to make those improvements. We also established a maths and science and technology unit at the Department of Basic Education, which is something that we didn't have before, and we got around to doing that because ANA told us that there was a need to do that.
Meanwhile, the Basic Education Department has confirmed that an investigation into a matric exam paper leak has been handed to the Hawks. More than 17,000 matrics in Limpopo will be forced to rewrite 2 life science examination papers following an exam paper leak in the province more than a week ago. The department say that 17,500 learners are set to rewrite following a special task team's investigation. The department spokesperson Elijah Mshlanga says an official close to the examination process reportedly leaked the paper to the learners, who in turn distributed it to their friends via social media. The department says 15,000 pupils are from the Vembe School District in Limpopo. The decision was taken after copies of the exams were leaked on social media and WhatsApp. 5 pupils from Gauteng and 2 from Mpumalanga have also been implicated. Now, Hau leaders say they are confident that a deal will be struck between Parliament and the union to end the ongoing strike by parliamentary staff. Striking parliamentary workers will meet again at the gates of Parliament this morning to receive feedback on the outcome of talks between Hau's national leadership and Parliament. Meanwhile, members of Parliament wrapped their business for the year on a rather low note last night.
It was the first time since 1994 that Parliament ended with all staff members locked outside the institution. They are always in the National Assembly to receive accolades from members of Parliament who they serve throughout the year before they break for their December holiday. But even inside the National Assembly and among themselves, there was still no love lost between the main political antagonists.
The ANC has presided over a parliament that has violated the basic rights of members of parliament, a right to freedom of expression. Members of parliament are intimidated, threatened and harassed through the use of bouncers as if we are in a tavern.
As for the issue of Nkandla, we know most of the opposition parties, you lost the battle in the committee. You have seen everything. We've been there. We killed your electioneering machinery.
But others tried to bury their differences and extended an olive branch to their opponents.
We haven't always agreed, but I think our conversations and our debates have been robust.
The NFP wishes everyone a Merry Christmas, Happy Prosperous New Year, and we hope that we'll come back rejuvenated.
In the United Democratic Movement, we have thoroughly enjoyed working and interacting with all of you.
We all have to be servants of the people, and let us do introspection when we're coming back next year.
Although they ended their final session under challenging circumstances, mainly due to strike action, they still appreciated the role played by striking workers. They've taken Parliament to the people on various occasions, and hundreds of submissions have been entertained through various portfolio committees. They'll be back again in January next year. I'm Manilisi Tubase for SABC News in Parliament.
News from further afield. France is holding a national memorial service for the 130 people who died in the Paris attacks 2 weeks ago. Today's service in central Paris is attended by President François Hollande, Parisians, as well as survivors and victims or families of the victims. Now, there will be a minute's silence and the names of all the victims will be read out. A sea of flowers and candles, photos and drawings flows into the sidewalk in front of the Bataclan concert hall, where 3 gunmen took hostages and killed scores of people. People continue to visit the makeshift shrine despite the heavy rain that fell throughout the afternoon. The victims of the attack, the deadliest in France since World War II, came from 17 different countries, many of them young people out on a Friday night at bars and restaurants, a concert hall and a football stadium. IS claimed responsibility for the attacks. Now that's your news for now. We'll take a break, and after the break, Eben will be back with more.
The son of Africa, Trevor Noah, is leaving America in stitches.
I never dreamed that I would one day have, well, two things really. An indoor toilet and a job as host of The Daily Show.
We are the first to bring you the latest films around the globe.
Dear white people, the minimum requirement of black friends needed to not seem racist has just been raised to 2.
Cobhams Asako is a gifted blind musician, a master of soothing notes from the piano.
I love to sit behind the piano. You know, that also helps me find inspiration.
Join Refulo Mulwa every Friday for that 1-hour weekly dose of art and entertainment news at 9 p.m. on Trends.
Preparing for victory requires intense effort and teamwork. When you get to it, there is no turning back, because all eyes are on you. When it's action time, nothing should stand in your way. Sports Live tackles and analyzes all the sport action. This is the home of all your sport news, updates, and more. Sports Live weekdays at 8:30 p.m.
Welcome back. You're still with Newsroom. Time for us to take a more regional focus to our news this morning. Our law enforcement officials conducted a joint operation raiding dilapidated buildings in the Durban CBD to weed out criminals within these establishments. They recovered drugs and arrested dozens of foreign nationals who are in the country without proper documentation. Now, for more on the raid, we are joined from our Durban studio by the eThekwini Municipality Safer City Senior Manager, Mr. Hussein Mula. Very good morning to you, Mr. Mula. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning to you.
Mr. Mula, can you just tell us about the initial idea of this raid? What was it? And tell us which law enforcement agencies were involved.
These are the raids that are conducted on a monthly basis by the eThekwini Municipality. It's a form of integrated operation that we do with all the relevant line departments that consist of your health, fire, electricity, water, and other line departments. It also involves your South African police services and your home affairs and the Metro Police. These operations are disruptive operations on targeted problem buildings within the city, which are non-compliant in terms of the city's bylaws, and also which house a number of criminal elements within these buildings in the city.
Tell us about the kind of drugs, weapons and the like that you've confiscated, and what kind of arrests were made in this case.
In this particular operation for the night that we had 27 people that were arrested. These were undocumented people that did not have permits to live in the country. They were arrested and then will be deported back to the countries. We also had a few arrests for drugs, that is possession of dacha and other drugs in the buildings. What we find that in most of these problem buildings within the city, crime is committed in the suburb and elsewhere, and these criminal elements then come and live within these buildings, some which are dilapidated and others which are illegal accommodations, where we find the building owners create sort of cubicles within the building structure. It's sort of like informal shacks within the building, where these people pay high amounts of money, and you find them living under these conditions which are non-compliant.
Now, some of those arrested and some tenants, they describe the approach as abusive and in some instances heavy-handed. What's your reaction to those claims?
Definitely, we do not advocate any hard-handed approach to these operations. Before these operations, we have a parade, and every officer is then briefed in terms of how he should conduct himself in terms of these operations. The only time there would be probably some sort of force that will be exerted if those suspects who resist arrest, there will be that type of force that will be exerted. But in most cases, we find that the officers are there. There are other officers that do these operations together. We also instruct them when they are doing searches within the room, that the occupants or the owners are present in terms of the searches, so there are no accusations later on made to the officers in concern. So obviously, people will then, some of them find it difficult for us to do these searches because we are targeting the criminal elements, and criminal elements in most cases will have complaints against these type of operations.
Now, going forward, Mr. Muller, what is the eThekwini municipality's plan then in dealing with dilapidated and empty, unused buildings in the CBD of Durban?
Well, this problem is a huge problem, not only, as I say, in the city of Durban. It's other cities in our country have similar problems, where we have buildings that are hijacked, where there are non-compliant illegal accommodations and dilapidated buildings. In next year, March, we have the new bylaws that will be promulgated in terms of the problem building bylaws. Will give us more strength and teeth to actually deal with some of these problem buildings. What we would be also doing in the cases of the night of the operation, there will be notices that will be served on the owners of the building. If there is still no non-compliance, then we will proceed with legal action and apply for high court action on these buildings. We have also come out with a new strategy in terms of dealing with some of these buildings, in terms of changing the rate code on the building, where the owners will be also charged, the rates will be sort of increased on these buildings, especially in those buildings where they have been illegally converted and there is total non-compliance. We, as the municipality, are making an appeal to owners to ensure that they become compliant, and the city is here to assist those owners of building to submit the necessary plans and do what is correct within the city and take responsibility for the buildings in the city.
Mr. Muller, thank you very much for joining us today from our Durban studio. The eThekwini Municipality Safer Cities Senior Manager, Mr. Hussein Muller. We're talking about the raids that have been going on in the city there this week. Now, we move to Cape Town, where Metro Rail says trains to Mandalay Station in the city will resume once police have given them a safety clearance. Community members set alight objects on the tracks under the Newsroom Bridge near Khayelitsha in protest against the removal of their electricity connections, resulting in train services to the station being terminated. A joint operation by the City of Cape Town, Eskom, and the Khayelitsha SAPS removed illegal electrical connections. Trains have been running irregularly, as Metro Rail can still not guarantee the safety of their trains. Now, for an update, Elvis Preslin talked to the Western Cape Metro Rail Regional Manager, Mr. Richard Walker.
The latest situation is that the mood is still quite tense out in the Nolongile area. However, it has stabilized to such an extent overnight because we've had quite a good police presence and our own protection services presence overnight to look at the infrastructure and guard the infrastructure, as well as to ensure, that there's no activity, riotous activity this morning. That has allowed us to be able to run a limited service this morning through to Khayelitsha to at least enable commuters, who's in possession of weekly and monthly ticket holders with transport from their houses through to work or, to school.
Mm-hmm. Let's first take a look at the issue of the damage that was caused, because once we believe that there was illegal connections which was removed, and that's why the community is in uproar. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is a joint, project which was initiated or implemented. The action was implemented on the 24th, but it's after lengthy, planning as well as engagement. The planning involved engagement with the community leaders, as well as the affected communities as well. And there was clear indication given to the affected communities as to when the action will be implemented on the 24th and when we will be, going through with actually disconnecting the illegal, wiring that is running under our rail infrastructure as well as over our overhead as well.
So is there still progress with regards to the complete removal of these electrical connections, illegal electrical connections in the informal settlements?
Well, it's ongoing. We have received reports, because we've not been operating between Mandalay and Khayelitsha, that some of these connections have been, reinstated. Together with the police, we are monitoring the situation. We've also had extensive damage to some of our track and signal equipment, which makes it then obviously very difficult for us to implement immediately a full service in that area. And also makes it very unsafe for us, to operate then a service in that area, because now you'll have to bring in a lot of manual operation in that area. We continue to be part of the, collaborative team. And remember, we are here now being caught in the middle of a community need for basic services, which is provided by the City of Cape Town, with the involvement of Eskom. And, we are operating a train service, and as for many community issues, because of our location in communities, we ultimately, become somehow negatively impacted or affected by some of these disputes. And Nolungile is no, unique situation, and it's some of the challenges we've been experiencing in that area due to service delivery protests as well, since probably for the past 18 months.
So you can't give us an indication as to when you will be up and running in that area again?
Look, our mandate is very clear. We need to provide, a commuter rail service in public interest, which means, we need to operate safely. We need to make sure it's on time, and we need to ensure, that it's affordable. We also understand, the plight of communities out there. We understand the profile of a commuter out there, and we know that it's expensive for them to make use of any other alternative transport. Therefore, it's important for us to make sure we carry out this mandate. And therefore, we've been monitoring the situation closely. And on the advice of police and protection services, we are committed to operate and run the service in that area. We'll be going into a meeting with the local leadership and councillors in the area, as well as the City of Cape Town and Eskom at 1 o'clock this afternoon, to see if we can find an amicable solution, around the demand by the commuters. It's unfortunate that they are using the rail system as a lever to highlight their plight, and that, they've taken to the type of action that they've taken. Obviously, we can't condone that action. Our, mandate is very clear, and we stick to that. We are not going to compromise safety. We're going to ensure that before we implement a full service in that area, we bring the infrastructure back, to design capacity to ensure that we can operate safe commuter rail service in that area.
Just briefly, Richard, have you calculated the cost of the damage caused?
Well, we've lost there 3, apparatus cases. We've lost about 5 track boxes, as part of the latest, situation. But I think, the issue of vandalism, it's a major issue for us. For the year, we've lost about 123, coaches just to vandalism. And, we've lost, also about 23 coaches in terms of train set coaches that have been satellite. And, this amounts into the tens of millions of rands in terms of, recovery cost and cost to repair, that type of loss. So even in this situation, on average, we're looking 18 to 20,000 rand just to replace one of those apparatus cases in that area. So it's extensive. It eats into our operational expenditure, and it makes it difficult for us to focus on other service improvements we would want to bring, because now we need to prioritize that funds, to try and bring back the service in that area.
That was Elvis Preslin dealing with vandalism on Metro Rail coaches and the lines there in Cape Town. Time for us to take a break, though. After a short little break, Kendall Mahamati will bring us a sports update.
Your World makes it its business every evening to round up the leading local stories and international news to keep you informed all the time.
Make a date with Your World every evening for all the news headlines around the world to keep you abreast with knowledge.
Catch Your World for headlines across the world every Monday to Friday from 9 p.m, then Saturday and Sunday from 7 p.m.
Good morning and welcome back. I'm Kendall Mahamad and I've got your sport on Newsroom. Now, South Africa's national cricket team is hanging on day 3 of the third test match against India in Nagpur. They were chasing 310 runs to win, and the Proteas lost 2 wickets during the morning session. But Hashim Amla and Faf du Plessis were leading the visitors' fight back. Earlier on, there were 128 for the loss of 4 wickets, and the spinner, Ravichandran Ashwin, who'd claimed 5 wickets in the Proteas' first innings, was again the chief destroyer on the morning of day 3 in Nagpur. It ensured that the visitors lost 2 crucial wickets early on. Dean Elgar and A.B. de Villiers were scalped for 18 and 9 runs respectively, leaving the Proteas on 58 for 4. But then skipper Amla, accompanied by du Plessis, led the Proteas' resistance. The pair shared a 70-run partnership, the highest of the series so far, defying India's attack and giving South African fans some hope. South Africa was still quite a few runs short, needing 142 runs to reach their target of 310 for victory. Now, with that said, we're going to go quickly to see what is happening in Nagpur, see if much has changed since those pictures we showed you just now. Let's take some live visuals from the current action in Nagpur, India.
Maybe the odd one in Australia, but not too many go the full 5 days. So the umpires have to decide on so many appeals. They get one wrong and they get pilloried. So tough job umpiring and wicket keeping.
Ashwin has bowled beautifully in this match. India needing just 2 wickets to win this match and the series.
Right now, South Africa is staring down the barrel of defeat right now, 168 for 8. It seems like all is lost, all is gone, but the last ball has not been bowled yet, so it remains to be seen whether South Africa can drag this one from the depths of defeat. Now, the Johannesburg Sansui Summer Cup annual horse race takes place this coming Saturday. This is one of the oldest and more prestigious horse races hosted at the Turffontein Racecourse right here in Johannesburg South. During the event, there's a total of 12 races run over the course of the day and early evening. Joining us is racing executive Clyde Basil. Good morning and welcome to Newsroom.
No, thank you for having us here. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Fantastic. Quite a lot of people have been quite interested to see what it is we're going to talk about when you come through here.
Yes.
And I think one of the things is some people don't know what the Summer Cup is. Could you give us some idea?
It's the equivalent of, I think, perhaps more people are familiar with the Vodacom Durban July in KwaZulu-Natal or the JMB Met in the Western Cape, and this is our Gauteng's backyard big event. And it's been around for many, many years. It has a sponsor that's supported it now for 7 years in Sansui, so hence the Sansui Summer Cup. But with Gauteng, who in the past have supported this race, I think the objective there ultimately is to see the economy grow and putting something back into our province by attracting neighbourhood countries to come to Gauteng and watch what happens at the Gauteng Sansui Summer Cup, and naturally with other benefits whereby transportation, etc., hotel and accommodation, all of those the extras that can certainly help the economy of Gauteng. And that's what the Sansui Summer Cup, apart from having 20 fantastic racehorses running in the race, it's 12 races altogether, but the big race is the 2 million rand Gauteng Sansui Summer Cup.
No, very good. I mean, especially down in Johannesburg South, that area has been overlooked in more recent times in terms of development and so on and so forth. So this should go down a long way towards helping that part of the economy.
Absolutely so. I mean, the Turfentine Racecourse is well over 130 years old in itself. Once you come onto the precinct itself, it's one of the most beautiful settings you'll ever see. It's a racecourse that offers a circumference of around 3,000 metres. It's the fairest racetrack, in my opinion, in South Africa, giving every horse an opportunity, equal opportunity. Jockeys, trainers, grooms, owners, everybody who's involved in this super event. And of course, that's the racing side, but then there's also the fun side of it too, where it gives everyone the opportunity to dress up, put on a favourite hat, a little bit of fashion, and come and enjoy a day at the races. It's a unique sport, a sport that I don't believe compares with any other. No other sport, in my opinion, offers you the opportunity to dress up whilst you're sitting in the stadium, and it does give everyone that some of that fun.
Well, it's not called the King's Sport for nothing, is it?
Yeah.
Can you tell us what the expectations are for this year?
I think bigger than before. We've, from an entertainment perspective, Ken, this year we've got Casper Neuwest, who I'm sure you know sold out the Dome a few weeks ago. He's performing at the Sansui Summer Cup in between races, as well as Mikasa. We've got Goldfish coming from Cape Town. We've got Good Luck, who will be there as well, DJ Van Dazel, and a whole host of other entertainers. So there's music. There's a great summer garden facility. There's the Josie Circle, if you want to come in and be a part of that. And, of course, Danea Maketsi herself, she's there with a whole host of celebrities who are ultimately going to compete on the track, sprint, I think, 100 metres or so, in goodwill of donating in excess of 800,000 rand to a beneficiary known as the SOS Children's Villages. That certainly will add to a whole lot that's happening on the day.
Sounds like quite a fun day. Can you tell us a little bit about the competitors? Any of last year's finalists competing again this year?
Well, yeah, there'll be a few. I think from a horse competitive perspective, I think they've been talking about French Navy, who's ultimately was one of the early favourites. I like the Cape Town horses that have come to... what we've seen more this year than in previous years is more horses from the Cape that have come to participate in the Gauteng Sansui Summer Cup, one of which is called Power King, who in fact won the Durban July. So he's in the race, Power King. I like two other horses in there from Cape Town called Disco L and Saint Tropez, whom I think might run big races. From a Gauteng perspective, that French Navy horse is the horse that ultimately is he's the standout guy here.
Now, as you notice, I'm actually taking down all these names that you're giving me right now.
Because don't hold me to it, though.
There are a whole lot of people who follow horse racing very closely. And I'd be remiss not to ask you, can you give us a winner?
I think that if you had to have a little bit of a fun side bet, I would probably have a place bet on a horse called Disco L, which is in the Gauteng Sansui Summer Cup from Cape Town. He's running Disco L to run a place, and by that I mean he has to either win or run second or run third or run fourth. So he doesn't necessarily have to win. And then enjoy the day and the rest of what the settings have to offer.
No, very good. In terms of parking, I'm sure there's more than enough parking in and around the race course itself.
Correct. Safe, secure parking at 75 rand to get into the gate, if you haven't already pre-booked into a special hospitality area. But if not, there are great opportunities on ground floor level, and you know, it's an opportunity for everybody to come and enjoy a unique experience, something that you don't normally get to attend to every day of the week.
No, very good. And lastly, and not least, the 2 million prize purse. That's for the main winner.
That's correct. I mean, there's a 2 million rand stake ultimately for the Gauteng Sansui Summer Cup. It's a big prize, and the horses aim, ultimately, they are the heroes, the horses, Ken, at the end of the day. And to watch these magnificent athletes in action is really what makes it work for us.
Mr. Clyde Basil, thank you so much for coming through.
Wonderful. Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
No, very good. From the Summer Cup, Sansui Summer Cup, happening over the weekend, Clyde Basil, the executive, joining us to make sure that we know what's going on with the Summer Cup. Do enjoy it and give us a quick tip. Disco L to place somewhere on the top. Now, the first test using a pink ball got underway this morning at the Adelaide Oval. New Zealand, the tourists, won the toss, elected to bat, and were bowled out by masterful Australia for 202. The true test of the ball will come when the lights come on, which should be happening shortly in Australia's innings. This test should make for some more interesting cricket over the weekend. That's where we leave it. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Eben Janssen is standing by with more news and analysis.
Interjections about the deployment of soldiers in townships provoke a war of words between the DA and the Minister of Defence.
Who were the beneficiaries when the database remains incomplete?
You have a bulk of your military veterans who are residing in your deep rural areas who do not have access to such health facilities.
We would want the military veterans register, for instance, to be made a public document for the sake of public interest.
A View from the House, weekdays, 2:30 p.m. CAT on SABC News.
Didier Drogba, a footballer from Ivory Coast, was named as the third most influential celebrity in Africa.
Where I saw him display, he's a very nice player. He always make an impact.
Drogba donated his $5 million endorsement fee to the construction of a hospital in Abidjan.
Well, there are some lesser-known football stars in the continent that you haven't met.
Really?
And are deserving of more attention.
I think we will do better.
The Journal, every Saturday at 1:30 on SABC News.
Yeah, great interview there. Summer Cup. I'll be at the Summer Cup tomorrow. Should be interesting. Always nice to be at the horses and flutter a couple of pennies. Let's hope I get lucky and you don't see me next week. Anyhow, jokes aside, let's look back at what was a very interesting week in the news. Here, we look back on our top stories this week.
What was the much-anticipated 12th COSATU National Congress has come and gone without its former biggest affiliate, NUMSA, and expelled Secretary General Zwelinzima Mavavi. Divisions were clear from day one of the Congress, and as soon as differences were ironed out, it was business as usual for delegates. Everyone preached unity and tolerance, from ANC President Jacob Zuma to the Labour Federation's president.
COSATU must rise above the challenges it is confronted with today and remain strong and united in the interests of the thousands of workers who see in it as the indispensable defender of their hard-won rights and conditions.
And in a surprising turn of events, Labour Minister Mildred Oliphant dropped a bombshell.
We find that some of the affiliates, on their own bargaining agreements, they have allowed the continuation of the labour brokers in the industries that they have organized. One of those affiliates, but I will be guided by the President. If he wants me to mention it, I will say it. or utingabeng saisho, was that they agree that the labor brokers must continue. The only thing that the employer must do is just to inform the union, not to negotiate with the union, to inform the union that they are continuing.
In another story of the week, Auditor General Kimi Makwetu has singled out health, education and public works department for having the worst audit outcomes in the 2014-15 financial year. Even though the irregular expenditure declined, it remains a major challenge on public finances. And in Cape Town, the Nehawu strike in Parliament continued this week. This follows a deadlock between Nehawu and the management of Parliament over performance bonuses. While the protest continued outside Parliament, President Jacob Zuma was addressing the National Council of Provinces on different issues. The drought and water crisis affecting the country was among the top issues on the agenda.
And His Holiness Pope Francis.
A befitting welcome for Pope Francis by Kenyans. In his first visit on African soil, he addressed Catholics at the public mass in Nairobi.
Of our relationship with nature.
And that's a brief wrap of your week. Now, the old school connection poise is set to give South African audiences a taste of yesteryear's music, as the legend Ted the Wizard Mills will take to the stage for the first time in South Africa at the Gold Reef Casino on Friday the 19th to Saturday the 20th of February 2016. That's next year. The Real Deal show features Ted Mills, the lead singer of the band Blue Magic, who will take music lovers down memory lane, reliving his various #1 hits. Chasing Rainbows, Remember November, Just My Imagination, which you'll hear in a short while. Take Me, Spell from the 70s era. Now, Mills is the lead vocal for the Blue Magic, an American R&B music group who are best known for dreamy Philly soul ballads, million-selling Sideshow, and the Three-Ring Circus, and also co-wrote some of the band's very popular songs. Now, more than 4 decades into their career, Blue Magic is coming to South Africa next year, and you must be very happy as ordinary South Africans waiting for the soul legends to be on stage. Here with me is the lead singer, Ted Wizard Mills. A very good morning to you and welcome, Ted.
Good morning, all the way from the States. Mm-hmm. And here I am at the Newsroom.
All right.
If you want to know what's going on, you got to check in with the Newsroom. It is such an honor to be here. And when you're in America, in New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, where I'm from, what you see and know about South Africa and Soweto and places like that is on television. And when you get here, it's not like that at all. Mm-hmm. This is incredible and wonderful.
Let's get back to your group, Blue Magic.
Yes.
Popular group. Tell us some more about the group and what South Africans can expect next year.
Well, actually, they can expect... I met so many people that they say that when they were young, they heard my records, they grew up on them. I actually met people who hugged me and tears came to their eyes because they said, I can't believe that I'm meeting you. This is my first time in Africa at all. And I'd like to thank my friend Poise, the promoter, and for bringing me here with my great band. But they can expect, let's put it this way, I made some great records, but the records are like in black and white, but the show is in color.
And when we talk about color, we're talking about great performances. And that's what you're going to do for us right now, right?
Yes, I'm going to do a very popular song now.
Mm-hmm. You can go over there, Ted,
Thank you.
And he will give you something that you will remember. If you're into soul music, if you're into R&B, rhythm and blues, you better stick around because right now Ted Mills is taking the stage with his song. He'll tell you more about that. Stay tuned for a second. Ted Mills and Blue Magic.
My window, I watch her as she passes by, and I say to myself, I'm such a lucky guy. Truly a dream come true, 'cause out of all the fellas in the world, she belongs to me. Just my imagination. My imagination. Just my imagination. Just my imagination. It's running out. Soon we'll get married, raise a family. We'll build a house in the country with 2 children, maybe 3. I can't visualize it. This could not be a dream, 'cause this dream seems all too real. But it was just my imagination. Just my imagination. It's running away. Every night on my knees I pray,